Here we go. Hello, good morning. Welcome to the January 15th, 2015 Downtown Design Review Committee. We really appreciate you being here. First order of business is roll call.
Betsy Brunstetter.
Present.
Gigi Faulkner.
Present.
Charles Ainsworth.
Present.
Ike Akenwande. Corey Bates. Connie Scothorn. Richard Tannenbaum. You have a quorum.
Great. Before we do anything else, I am going to introduce our new member. I'm so excited to tell you that Corey Bates is our new member for the Downtown Design Review. And Corey is an architect with Miles Associates. He was the project designer for the GE Oil and Gas Research Center and comes from New York, educated in Chicago. We're really excited to have him. So, well, we'll see. I think he's turning into an Oklahoman very quickly. Approval of the minutes. Has everyone had a chance to read the minutes, and do I have a motion? Second. Tannenbaum, Faulkner, all in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Okay. There are no cases withdrawn, no continuance request, and nothing on the consent docket. Because we have the opportunity to have two projects that are right there together, I would like to kind of change up the docket a little bit and be able to see the OG&E block. And if the applicant is present, I'd like them to come forward and talk to us about it.
Not as tall as most people. Good morning, my name is Larry Chapman. How are you today? Really happy to be here. This is always a lot of fun to talk about a new project, so here we go. I'm a partner with Clayco Realty Group. I'm here to present the first of what we hope is 4 properties someday, the One South Hudson office building. Joining me today are Megan McDermott and Chris Heim. They're with Robert A.M. Stern Architects, or RAMSA. They're the design architect for this project. And then I have Neil Eisenberger with Forum Studio, who is doing the master planning, and they're also the architect of record for the 4-building development plan. Hans Hecker, another Forum Studio member, is in the background in case we need him for support and you have questions that he can answer. Anyway, we're excited to have this opportunity. We're looking forward to get to know the board. We think we're going to be here a lot in the not-too-distant future. And so what I'd like to do is, any way you can help us understand the best way to present to you or the kinds of things you'd like to see so we can get better and better at this as we go, it would be thoughtful for you to kind of let us know that, because we do want to do a great job. I also want to clarify some things about what we're doing today. For starters, we're trying to get the office building, One South Hudson, the parking garage started in April, and so those are really the only approvals we're seeking. We are not, for example, looking for approval of landscaping plans. While they're fairly detailed, and you're going to see a lot of that today, there's still some evolution that has to happen before we make a formal submittal, and there's still a lot of discussions going on about plazas and things like that that we want to make sure we get your input on. So what we want to do today is just present, listen, answer questions, and then we're going to ask for a formal approval of the building and the garage in March rather than February. And kind of the reason for that is it allows us to incorporate what we hear from you all today, but because we're asking for tax increment financing, the OCURE board, or the Oklahoma City Urban Renewal Authority, has asked for a look at the plans as well, which we've submitted to them. We want to give them time to give us comments and incorporate things that they may have. And we don't know what those are yet, but we supported this, we supplied them with the same plans that we've supplied you all today. We also are not asking for the apartment tower in this block. We'll come back for that as well. When you see the 4-block plans, you've probably seen apartment towers and office buildings. We're just after the very first office building now. And we're a little bit behind schedule because, to be candid with you, and particularly on the office tower, this whole big drop in oil prices has kind of set us on our ear trying to figure out how to make the capital come to it, but we're getting it figured out. It just hasn't quite happened yet. There's also more planning to be done on the block to the south. Right now, we're planning that as pretty much a mirror image of the north. But again, as we learn things and as we begin to test the market a little bit better, we'll have a better idea of what that's really going to be. And again, we'll come back in front of you when we do that. Also, when we look at the whole 2-block area, We've got a lot of great ideas for addressing the pedestrian level issues. We really want to do a great job there. We're looking at things like reopening California so vehicular traffic can pass on it, and we can put some retail over in those areas, but we can't do that until the South Block is actually in the fold. Right now, we're in the process of negotiating a redevelopment agreement for that with Ocura. We'll meet with them again today, and as soon as that gets to the point where we're all comfortable we've got an agreement, then we'll whip up those plans and come back and get in front of you here pretty quickly. So far, what we've done is had a bunch of reviews with staff. So what we think we're doing is a thoughtful approach to the design review process. We've gotten their comments, had some really healthy and good conversations. We spent a lot of time trying to understand the downtown design development guidelines. We've incorporated those, and I think you'll hear from our presenters today what we're doing in that regard. So I'm not going to keep talking on. What I'd like to do right now is introduce Megan McDermott from RAMSA. Thank you.
Good morning. Is this mic'd? Okay. Okay. Thanks.
Sounds like it's working, unlike mine. And we will probably, not to look like we're avoiding you or anything, but because the screen is behind us, we'll be looking down at computers in front of us.
Got it. Okay. Thank you. And then can you see the cursor on the screens in front of you? Good. Okay. Well, good morning. We appreciate this opportunity to discuss the project with you. We're very excited about it, and we're very excited to be part of the urban renaissance that's underway in Oklahoma City. So we look forward to hearing your comments and to answering the questions that you may have about the project this morning. So this is obviously an aerial view of the site, and this is really a pivotal site, as Larry mentioned, and it's really a cornerstone. And we have re-envisioned it as the vital first step in the expansion of downtown. This project, together with ultimately the South Block, will form the western edge, the new western edge of Myriad Gardens. And so we've thought very carefully not just about the architectural design of the buildings, but also how this project will contribute to and enliven the public realm. We want to extend the pedestrian-friendly urbanism that is part of downtown now. We want to strengthen the relationship of this site to Myriad Gardens and the buildings that currently line it, Devon to the north and the others that are under development. We want to create public spaces that will attract people and will support a variety of activities. We want to define the street wall and energize the streets and sidewalks by lining them with appropriate uses, and to further, to continue the great work of the Downtown Streetscape Master Plan. So the project is comprised of a limestone and glass office building, which is 391 feet tall. It will be the new headquarters for OG&E, and it will also have some additional office space in the building. We see it as a modern interpretation of the Art Deco style, which is found throughout Oklahoma City, but it's been contemporized with larger windows and abundant light, and we'll talk more about that shortly. We want to imbue the building with a timeless, classic quality that befits its importance to its civic importance on this site. So just to step back for a moment and look at the larger relationship of this site to downtown Oklahoma City. Of course, Myriad Gardens is a wonderful civic space, and it hosts a variety of events throughout the year. The Devon Project and the Devon Gardens anchor the north edge of that site, and this building, as I mentioned, will define the western edge. But you've also looked very carefully, or started to look very carefully at what will happen to Oklahoma City in the coming years and decades as it expands south toward the river. And so when the convention center, which we know is being planned right now, when that comes online and these other redevelopment projects begin to emerge, Myriad Gardens is really going to be the heart of a new district in the city as it expands southward. We know that you are studying plans for light rail, and it looks as though the route will probably pass along Hudson Avenue, and so there will be a light rail stop probably in the future along the site that will bring people here. Another interesting thing that we've noted about Oklahoma City is the prevailing winds from southwest to northeast, and the reason that arrow goes from blue to brown is because there's also a dust issue that we understand that it can be windy and dusty, and so that has informed our thinking about how the open spaces are located, to try to shelter and protect them from that. And we also, it's informed our thinking about the exterior materials of the building. Actually, there's a unique warm color to the limestone of many of the buildings in Oklahoma City, and we suspect maybe that's part of that has to do with the dust and the air over time, but it's actually quite beautiful, the color. So we'll come back to that. So here is a zoomed-in view, again, of the site. The tower sits along the eastern edge of the site. There is a parking structure which is directly adjacent to it, and as Larry mentioned, future apartment building, which we envision would be located at the northwest corner of the site. And so the drawing that you're seeing here, it's a site plan, and it's actually a roof plan of the buildings. The rectangular building here is the tower, which holds the street edge along the sidewalk. The streetscape improvements that have already been established along Myriad Gardens, the Devon project, we want to continue those standards, bring those ideas to this site. And we've envisioned a series of outdoor gathering spaces located around the site. And I'll talk a little bit about those. Here's the office tower, the parking structure. This plaza at the northeast corner of the site, we really envision as an outdoor room. It's fairly modest in scale. It would have a very carefully landscaped edge. We envision some kind of a kiosk structure. It might have a cafe or host other functions that would help to enliven it. It would be flanked by retail. There would be outdoor seating. It would be synergistic with the outdoor plaza space across Sheridan Avenue that we know is being planned. So this is really a new outdoor room across the street from the park, and also one of the entrances to the office tower is located here, which I'll talk more about in a moment. California Avenue, we have reconceived, as Larry mentioned, as a public plaza. It would be paved. It would have the potential to accommodate vehicular traffic, but really would be a new and exciting pedestrian zone. It could accommodate special events. We know that the Arts Festival may be moving, but it could certainly accommodate that or many other interesting activities and events. There is a public art program. The owner and OGE have committed to that, and so that's still in the planning process, but there will be a significant public art component throughout the public spaces and also in the lobby of the building. What you're seeing here is that there is a landscaped portion above the garage which will be accessible for the tenants of the office tower. There will be some paving and some landscape components there. And then the balance of the roof of the parking structure is not accessible. It will be planted. It will be something that's really attractive to look down upon, but the idea is that it's not meant to be accessible. So now what I'm going to do, this is the ground floor plan. I'm going to walk you around the key components of the plan. The building right now is approximately, the street is not quite orthogonal, but it ranges from between 21 and 28 feet back from the curb edge. And when we had some informal discussions with the staff, comment was raised that we should try to pull the building closer to the street edge to hold the street wall. And so since we last met with them in December, we've pulled it 22 feet closer to the street. And we think that's a really positive development. The OG&E lobby is this space here, and it faces east and fronts Hudson Avenue and the park. It will be very transparent and glassy. It will have a public art component that is visible from the sidewalk and from the street, and also probably from the park across the street. It then leads into elevator vestibules behind the reception area at that location. There is a separate entrance lobby at the ground floor on the north side of the building, which you can see here, which opens out onto this north plaza, and that would be for the other tenants of the building. And that would take those tenants into this elevator vestibule at this point. The balance of the ground floor is retail, and we think it's really important to activate the street and the plaza spaces to line them with as much retail as possible. So you'll see that this is a retail space here at the corner. another retail space here to the west of this entrance lobby. We envision a very large retail space here along Sheridan Avenue, which also opens out to the plaza. So the hope is that we'll be able to attract a restaurant tenant, for example, that could have outdoor seating in this plaza area. And this retail space is 85 feet deep, so it's quite substantial. It can accommodate a major tenant, a leasing tenant. And then there is retail, again, on the south side of the tower that opens out into the California Avenue Plaza. Retail at this corner, this is actually, this retail space here and here, these are actually under they're within the parking structure, but this would be a dedicated retail space here. Again, with the potential for outdoor seating in this grove of trees potentially on the plaza. And then further down California Avenue, we're showing temporary parking at grade here, but the idea is that this, over time, as this whole site develops, would also become an important retail space, and it turns the corner, so there would be retail frontage ultimately on South Walker once that is ultimately in place. Parking, let's talk a little bit about how parking works on the site. Parking is accessed primarily from Walker Avenue. The parking structure is 1 level down and 6 levels up. This is the primary entrance and egress point for the garage. There is an additional entrance to the 1 level of below-grade parking from California Avenue, and that's really meant to be convenience for the retail. So, for example, if there's a restaurant at this corner and you want to be able to drop somebody off and go in and park immediately, or come in and access the retail that will eventually line California Avenue, that's a real convenience point. But it's a limited number of cars that would be entering that area, and this plaza would be designed such that it can be, it can be shut down to vehicles for special events. It will be very flexible in its programming capability. Service is buried within the parking garage on the ground floor. There are 2 access and ingress and egress points for service for trucks. One is on West Sheridan Avenue. The other is on Walker Avenue. Those openings are 30 feet, which we've kept them as tight as possible because we want to maximize building frontage on the street as opposed to garage doors and things. But the good news is that all that stuff is hidden and buried within the parking garage, so you'll never see the active loading dock from the street. So that's what this zone is here. And then this is the site of the future residential building. At the ground level, the lobby of that building ultimately would be here, and there would be retail space complementing the balance of that floor, which extends to the corner. So again, the idea is to line this building with active uses and as much retail as possible, flanking the entrance points. Then this is a stacking diagram that just shows you briefly how the building is organized. So here is the office tower, which faces the park, the 6-story garage, which abuts up to it. The lobby is 35 feet tall, a triple height space, and then service and support functions are kind of buried in that zone between the lobby and the garage. Additional office tenants in the lower floors of the building. There are amenity spaces in the building, I mentioned, for the tenants that will open out to the roof terrace over the parking garage. The mechanical equipment at the top of the building will be completely screened by the facades of the building. So the crown of the tower will hide the equipment, either whether it's exposed or covered. All of that will be screened from view from the street, and you'll see that in the perspectives in just a moment. And then back to the ground level plan for reference, and then very quickly, there is a lower level. This is the lower level parking plan that I mentioned, below grade 1 floor. And then moving up through the building very quickly, double height lobby and triple height lobby and double height retail spaces, typical floor plate, just under 23,000 square feet, amenities floors. This is the occupied portion of the roof terrace that I mentioned. The balance of it would not be accessible except for maintenance purposes. Typical office floors. And then at the very top of the building, there's a porch for the office tenants and Chris Heim, my colleague, will talk more about that in a moment in terms of that architectural expression and how it fronts the park and gives the building an identity on the skyline. And so with that now, I'm going to turn it over to Chris Heim, and he's going to talk more about the exterior building materials around the project.
How high this goes. Thank you, Megan. I'm Chris Heim. I'm a senior associate at Robert Amsterdam Architects in New York City. I'll be speaking more to the building's look and feel from the outside. From the outset, we made the decision to go with an Art Deco interpretation, largely as a counterpoint to the very fine modern building in Devon already, and to be able to set a spectrum of possibilities for the development of Oklahoma City over time. Great care has been taken from the outset to give the building a sense of height. It's actually not a terribly tall building, especially not in comparison to the 850 feet of Devon. And so we've proportioned everything and grouped everything in such a way that would have a colossal civic scale. And I think we've done a good job with that. Starting on the lobby level, we have these grand subdivided windows which look into the lobby. Not shown here, but in our most current thinking, there will be a canopy, a large glass canopy feature over the entrances, which will give a secondary scale to the lobby and give a pedestrian experience as a counterpoint to the colossal experience that you see from far away. The building is meant to be natural limestone, probably in a panelized system with energy-efficient glazing set into bronze, or at least the appearance of bronze window surrounds. And as we go up through the typical office floors, which have been grouped into fours, as I mentioned, with care for their proportion, we arrive at the top at this porch, which is meant as a symbolic sort of civic gesture. The porch is a uniquely American architectural device, and it implies welcoming and it implies a sense of gathering. So we thought that was appropriate for this, and it will be seen from many distances in and around the city. Do I advance by clicking? Yeah. So what we were just looking at was the main elevation, the east facing the park, and the north, which faces Sheridan. These here are the south and west. So as you can see, the limestone tower is symmetrical on four sides. The parking deck is admittedly a step or two beyond, or I'm sorry, below the tower in terms of development, but it will eventually be a limestone cladding meant to be of the same cloth as the tower, and it will give the appearance of active office space as opposed to a straight parking deck. You won't see cars. You'll see glazing and stone and such. It'll be power ventilated through the roof in order to allow that to happen. So here's two street-level views, one standing in Myriad Gardens looking back to the north and west, and another standing in the Devon Gardens, or the plaza immediately out front of Devon, looking back to the south and west. I should also mention, as Megan did, the retail spaces which make up the balance of the ground floor outside of the lobby, which are housed in these large format projecting boutique windows. And here's another view from Sheridan looking west. Here you can more clearly see that porch and its gesture. And we should mention, too, that signage hasn't been developed yet, nor has lighting. But this will be a lantern at night, much as Devon is. It'll have, basically, it'll capture light within there, and there'll be some other accents and things. And here's an aerial view taken from roughly over the Chesapeake Arena, looking back north and west, with the next project on your docket, Ghosted Inn, to the right of it. And I think with that, we're going to transition to what we have for site design. Neil will be speaking to that. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Neil Eisenberger with Forum Studio Landscape Architect. As Larry mentioned earlier, we appreciate the continued dialogue with this project. We've met with the planning department over a few meetings, and it's been very good to listen and understand all the good work that's been done to date. And so it was very important for us to understand the original downtown streetscape master plan, as well as the new downtown framework plan that's been happening as well as to understand the Project 180 work that's being done all throughout downtown, as well as it relates to the street improvements. And so I'll start to the north with Sheridan Avenue and touch on what Megan had already laid out for us. But the important thing was to understand the zones of the storefront streets, and making sure within the streetscape design that we highlight the amenity zone, the expanded amenity zone, which would contain landscaping and site furnishings and site lighting, which would be a continuation of what's been done today with Project 180 as relates to being complementary to that. So it's important to highlight that. There may be expanded landscape where we may group a few trees together. Typically that helps for street health, or for tree health rather. And then as well as that, making sure that we accommodate with the expanded pedestrian zone along the street as well. Highlighting intersections with special paving as well, being continuous with what's happening, or continuity with what's happening on other streets. Along Hudson, very similar. We would continue with obviously highlighting that amenity zone with site furnishings, landscape along Hudson. Obviously, it's really important to understand the context of what's across the street. Beautiful London plane trees that are happening on that other side of the street. Those are all for health. Been in a decomposed chat on the other side over there, which I think tree health is doing really well. We would highlight the entrances to obviously to the building with special paving. And then, where possible, expand those landscape zones along Hudson here, see here to the north and to the south. As Megan mentioned on California, the idea being on California is that this is more of a plaza space. It has flexibility, and you can see that section at the bottom left, which sort of shows that continuity across with flush curbs that would allow for a multitude of events. And the idea being there that there could be special paving from obviously from north, the building, to the south, to a special paved zone rather than potentially, in a typical, what you might find in a typical street. So that gives that flexibility to be a plaza and gathering space. As well as we've located drop-off to support the retail that could occur here along the southern edge of the building, and that could be dropped off and parked here directly in the building. So making sure that whole pedestrian vehicular experience works well for functioning for the building. As I mentioned, the plaza space to the south here, that obviously being more exposed than the northeast would have a nice lush landscape that would give the user a little more protection from winds and sun, as well as to also provide for dining, flexible dining space here along this edge. Along Walker, similar conditions as we might find along Sheridan. Obviously, this is a little different. This street functions more as a high-intensity street, and this one as well would have the highlighted amenity zone as well as the expanded pedestrian zone. We would also make sure when we cross aprons to the parking structure, we would also make sure that we highlight and provide for safe pedestrian crossing across those aprons as well. Also, it's so important for understanding, the local landscape, and we've reviewed and understand trees and plants of Oklahoma City, and we've have gone through that document and carefully selected plants that we feel will work well in urban conditions, have been suggested as such, as well as perennials, ornamental grasses, and shrubs. At this point, we're still conceptual, so we haven't exactly identified which tree goes where, but it's important to understand the context of what's happening across the street. Across the street at the school, they're using bald cypress. It might be similar to match what's happening there. We'll work through that as this design evolves. Some more plants and shrubs, perennials, all native, a lot of them native to Oklahoma. Paving materials, we're still in the early phases of understanding, but we know that highlighting that amenity zone is very important. It's happening throughout the downtown area. So a sheet there that indicates a lot of some of the site. The next page is site furnishings that have been established and carefully established over time with Project 180. So continuity is important for us, and we've understood and appreciated that.
So,
Thank you.
that's what we have for you so far. Having never been here before, I'm not sure what's next, but if you want to ask questions or tell me what to do, I'm happy to do it.
Well, at this point, I'd like to ask if any citizens would like to speak to this project, and then we'll see if the committee has any questions or comments on the project. So, anybody from the? Okay, looks like nobody. So, Questions, comments from the committee?
Madam
Anything?
Chairman, Betsy, how many parks in the design, how many parking spaces in your parking garage?
Currently, this parking garage has 1,485 spaces, which is adequate for both the office tower and the residential 250-unit apartment building.
250 units?
Yeah.
And Clayco is the developer and OG&E is the principal tenant?
Yes, OG&E is the principal tenant. They'll occupy about two-thirds of the building.
Where's my buddy Rainey?
Huh?
Where's
He's
Rainey?
actually not in.
What happened to Rainey?
He'd love to be here, but he's not in town. He'll be in
He's
for the
still
next meeting.
involved.
Oh, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. He just couldn't be
I
here
think,
today.
I love the deco, I love the design. You live on the 29th floor of the city place, so I'm looking at
over with
that
Meg,
empty
yeah.
space and the holes, so get going.
We're ready.
You know,
We're going to go as fast as we can.
It's ugly right now. No, I think it looks phenomenal, and I think it's satisfying. I like the position of the parking garage on the west side versus right on the street there.
Okay. Any other comments?
Oh, I like the way you've wrapped the building, flanked it with retail and active use, and I really like the way you've integrated the active use into the parking structure
That's it. We're
very much.
And we're really working hard on the retail. Retail's a little bit of a challenge. You know, you're in this spot where you don't have quite enough people living downtown yet, but we want to encourage that. And one of the things we've noticed in other cities that are similar to Oklahoma City, you've got a lot of people who drive their cars. And so you got to have some parking near the retail to give it any chance at all, so people won't have to search for a spot. They know they're going to have a spot instantly when they go to that place. And that's what that convenience parking is about. We're going to first have it where it can be more retail later, so people can just park there for free, or in the garage, which is less desirable, but, you know, just a way to maybe beat the challenge a little bit.
It's a lovely building.
Okay, thank you.
I have a couple comments. First of all, thank you for coming and presenting. I think it is a lovely building, and the team had a very nice presentation.
Good, thank you.
I've got a couple notes here, so please just bear with me
Absolutely.
as I go through them. I very much appreciate the position of the tower on the east side of the site, how it frames Miri Gardens. I'm hopeful that the development to the south just makes some of the same moves in bordering Miri Gardens and really closing the park. I appreciate the long-term planning of another tower, the residential tower in the northwest corner, and the amount of retail at the base, as you've discussed. I also appreciate the treatment of the roof of the garage. I think it's very pertinent to consider the views from other buildings looking down on the project. I also appreciate the effort of going below grade to insert a level of parking and support some of your parking need by going below grade. I do have a concern with the amount of traffic that there potentially is going to be on Walker Avenue, especially considering the elementary school on the site to the west. I think, Sheridan could potentially be used a little more for some of that access to alleviate the load from Walker. I know you said the development of the exterior of the garage was still in the works, and I very much appreciate the rhythm and the module that's been established on that facade. Given the northwest and south facades, I think it does maybe become a little much of a repetition of the same module, and that there's potentially opportunities to create points of emphasis, maybe something at the northwest corner that would relate to the future residential tower. Right now, the only highlights along that repetition are the entrances and exits from the parking, and that's not really what we want to highlight. On the east side, is the plaza on California Avenue, is that intended to be the drop-off for OG&E?
Not particularly, no.
Okay. Then I would think that the OG&E lobby would need people being dropped off to that OG&E lobby would need to be addressed on the east side of the building. And then just one minor comment, in the lower level where you have the two ramps that are coming down, the intersection of those two ramps at the base just seems like a slight concern with traffic. There's a hard right corner there that restricts some visibility. If people are coming down the ramps at the same time, that could be a concern. But again, I think it's a great project. I appreciate the efforts. I'm looking forward to the development on the southern block.
Right, so let me just make a couple quick comments, and we'll go back and address all your comments before you see the final set of plans. It'll be put back here in February, as I understand it. One, on the south block, our intent right now is to do a mirror image. We just need to get a little further along with the Okura board before we invest in several $100,000 worth of plans. And then on the below-grade parking, frankly, we would have gone down 2 or 3 levels. The problem is there's water at 15 feet, and you're building a boat down. It was just not possible, sadly. I don't know why the water's there that way, but it is. On the traffic, you would have already seen the traffic study, but the staff asked us to make sure that that traffic study was combined with the work on 499 Sheridan so we could see the whole picture, and that's what's going on. But we do share some of your concerns, and that's one of the reasons California is so important, because it allows you to bleed some of that traffic off and bring it onto Sheridan instead of dumping it all on Walker at certain peak times. So that would be a nice thing to do. We just have to get a little further with Okura to do California because they own half of it, you know. So we've got some things working. I think at the end of the day, it's all going to work out very, very well. We'll address your thoughts on the drop-off area for OGE and make sure that we give a thoughtful response to all that. But I do appreciate your comments. Thank you.
Anybody else? As you probably saw me writing like mad while you were talking. So what is the schedule for the residential tower?
Well, we had hoped to start that within a couple of months after the office tower, and we're still hopeful we can do that. We should have a design finished here in the next week or 10 days, and I would think we would be in front of you by the end of February or March. And when I look at the schedule last, I mean, I would like to see that going up in June. That would allow us to open before midwinter in 16, which we would rather not start in midwinter. There's times you just don't want to open an apartment building. And so I would expect, you know, literally within a couple of months here at the most.
Okay. Just a couple of comments on the plans. I really like the way you've utilized the space, pushing the garage up to the building and treating it more like an urban site with that nod to the Mary Gardens on the other side. However, I just have to ask the question, as an architect, do you feel like you're going to have any issues leasing that space that's right up next to the parking garage?
Well, I think anything retail in Oklahoma City is going to be a challenge. And there are other uses that may be suitable there when you go around the corner. An example might be the Myriad Garden Foundation that's going to need a new home when it moves out of the South Block, things like that. But our goal is to find a way to make the retail work. We've hired some consultants out of New York that do a lot of retail planning, and they're in the process of doing some reporting to tell us how we can get the right kinds of mixes down there. I'll let Megan answer the question about, you know, how the space ties together.
Well, and I was actually, I really applaud. Yeah, I think you know what I'm talking about.
You were talking about the office floors that
Right.
back up to the garage, right?
Oh.
So the first 3 floors of that will be service. There'll probably be mechanical equipment. You know, the lobby is triple height, so there's a zone there that will be, you know, you'll put all the stuff that doesn't need windows anyway. And then the floors above that, we envision there will be a need for certain kinds of meeting space in the building, functions like that will have windows on 3 sides. It's really just that one side. And so, you know, OG&E may end up using some of that space, but we feel like there probably will be some building amenities that will be tucked into that zone right against the parking.
Okay, great.
Floors.
I was thinking that
Yeah.
there's some opportunity, but Also, I really like the ground floor parking garage, as you were just mentioning. And I know that if we don't start getting more ground floor retail, we're never going to get it. So we've got, it's got to start somewhere. And I really like the fact that you have used the majority of the space on that ground floor as retail. So I think that's a great plus. I like the creative way that you've put the on-grade parking that could potentially move to a retail function. I think that's great. Also, just to echo Corey and everybody else's thoughts on the green roof, that is fabulous. I know that's going to be a real benefit to your tenants and other people in the area. I also like the building has a different style. I love the buildings that are going up right now, and I think they're beautiful, but I think having a little variety is nice as well. And I like the way that the parking garage is designed, just to echo Corey's comments on that. I think that my biggest concern, and we've mentioned in the staff report for our next client, or on our next project, that there is a parking study or a traffic study happening. And when you start looking at the large number of cars coming out, it does concern me that Walker is a street that was planned through 180 to be 2-lane. I assume that there was a study for that. And then it's got an elementary school that we're so proud of, and we've been able to accomplish when a lot of other cities have not. And evidently children run across that street all the time. So cars coming in and out, late for work, wanting to get home, whatever. There's a dangerous precedent by putting all those cars out on that street. And I am not a parking expert, and I'm not a traffic expert, so I really look forward to seeing that study. So anyway, appreciate everything you've done. Appreciate you coming and showing us this today. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Oh, you have? Okay.
I'm sorry.
Well, I just want to echo exactly what Betsy just said, and I'd say this to John and your development. I mean, I'm not my public school education is getting the best of me, but I think there was about 6,000 cars, more or less, that are going to be dumped out in about a 4-block area, and I really think this traffic study is vitally important to make sure that we can make that work as smoothly as possible. And as for the ground floor spaces, I would say, the mantra's been retail. I think retail personally is going to be slow in coming. I don't know if Dick would agree with me, but I think those ground floor spaces can be used for other uses. And I would say, being in the business, there's not much ground floor office space downtown, and I think there's a pretty big pent-up demand for that. So I would urge you to not only, if you hit a brick wall in retail, I would say that those spaces should be designed in such a manner that you could accommodate office for at least some period of time. But I think it's a beautiful development.
Okay, Connie?
Put more. And as you're talking about the retail, I think the site design is really thoughtful, the way you have different plazas that would match, hopefully, different restaurants. I think that was really done well. I was curious, you mentioned art on the east side. Is that inside or outside?
Yeah.
The vision now is that there would be some kind of art installation in the lobby, and then we're looking at the program for the North Plaza and along California Avenue, and that's being developed right now. And so we'll come back to you with more specific ideas about that. But something inside, something outside is the thinking.
Great. And I really couldn't see. It was really small. So I can't wait to see the final plans, and hopefully you'll print them a little bit bigger.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
I love
I'm
the
not
art
sure I
deco.
know the right medium. They told us to put it on 11 by 17 size paper, and then it gets on a screen. It gets so small. I'm not sure what the best way to present to you all is. We'll do it any way you like.
11 by 17 is actually pretty good. Connie and I will get our microscopes out and look at the words, but and Connie is a landscape architect, so she is very, very meticulous in looking at the landscape. So, yeah.
That's good. That's awesome. I think that's great.
Anyway, thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
coming.
Appreciate
We'll look
that.
forward to seeing you in a couple of months. Okay. So the next item, once again, I want to thank especially the next applicant that's coming, and thank you for coming to Oklahoma City. Thank you for doing this development. I think we all appreciate it. And thank you, any citizens that are here to comment one way or the other. We really thank you for being here and being involved in the process. So,
Madam Chair?
Yeah.
On this project, I recuse myself.
you recuse it. Okay. Corey will be recusing himself on this.
Also, I don't know if I need to recuse myself, but Nick Prefdix is my landlord and occasional client.
Okay. Well,
Are you behind in your...
that was just your opportunity to express that. Thank you very much.
Madam Chairwoman, members of the committee, my name is David Box, 522 Colcord Drive, and I am here on behalf of the applicant today. Before you today is an application to continue the momentum of downtown Oklahoma City. There has been a renaissance in our city downtown, and this is a key step to continue that. It's a key step to build our skyline. It's a key step to increase our job growth, but also retain jobs. With me today, I have an incredibly talented team of individuals that are going to speak to you on various aspects of this application. We've got Debbie Holtzclaw with COTPA. She's going to talk about the downtown parking problems. We've got Mark Beffert with Newmark, Grubb, Levy, Strange, and Beffert, who will also address parking, but from a different perspective. We've got Tom Darcy with Hines, the project developer, who will talk about the project. We've got John Picard with Picard Chilton, who will talk about the design of the project, changes made to the project. We also have Nick Prefdix, who represents the ownership group. He's going to talk about his feasibility study he did on this project as it relates to economics. And as a developer, what problems this block faces as it currently stands. We also have Sheila Condon, who is with Clark & Condon, an associate. She is the landscape designer of this project. We have Clay Kimker with Devon, who will talk about parking from a different perspective. We have Shannon Fetz with Devon, who will also talk about parking and the need for parking for this project, but also an overall downtown need. And we also have Mr. Larry Nichols, who's the chairman of Devon, who will speak about the importance of this project for Devon's needs and the importance of the project for downtown. This project, like any development of any size in downtown, the conversation starts and ends with parking. That's the reality in downtown Oklahoma City that we face today, and this project is no different. And the reason is, as we sit here today, we have an acute shortage of parking that prohibits new businesses from moving downtown. It limits the ability of existing businesses from expanding. When you look at the overall landscape of downtown Oklahoma City, every parking garage we currently have has a waiting list. Every surface parking lot that I'm aware of is full or has a waiting list. What that does is limit your ability to develop. We want to continue the momentum we have in downtown Oklahoma City. And without parking to match a development's needs, but also provide for future retail like this body wants to see, future office space like this body wants to see, it won't happen. So what we need is a responsible project with responsible parking. And we think we have that here. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Holtzclaw to address parking issues.
Good morning. Debbie Holtzclaw. I'm with COPTA, 300 Southwest 7th Street. Again, as he said, I was asked by the developer to provide information on the parking situation downtown. As you know, the Central Oklahoma Transportation and Parking Authority owns and operates 5 of the city's public parking garages and several surface lots, accounting for almost 5,000 parking spaces. For the past 2 years, we've been averaging 115 to 120% occupancy. And just to kind of, I was going to give you a little, the Santa Fe garage, we currently have 1,712 monthly parkers. We also serve 2 hotels. We have the Renaissance and the Skirvin, so that changes your diversity and your numbers as well. The Cox garage, which was designed to be for conventions and events. We currently have 1,051 monthly parkers. It's 175% occupancy, basically. The Century Center garage is currently closed for renovations, but we are providing a shuttle service for the parkers that were in there, and then also we're anticipating the OPUBCO employees that will be parking in that garage, bringing it over 100%. Our Sheridan Walker garage, we have 1,351 monthly parkers. It's 104% occupancy. The Arts District garage, which was opened 2 months ago, we currently have a waiting list of 365 parkers. Plus, we're in the process of adding tenants to the retail space on the ground floor, which will also increase my parking needs. These numbers do not account for daily transient or events. These are monthlies, monthly parkers only. So anytime we have any kind of events, conferences, people wanting to come downtown for appointments or whatever, those are not in those numbers. So that's just to let you know. And just a final note, I receive calls weekly, from either business owners needing to hire or wanting to hire additional employees, or property managers looking to lease space, and they're all looking for parking. So, and with that, thank you for the opportunity.
Next, I'm going to have Mr. Beffert discuss his ownership interest in various properties, but also what that means from a parking perspective. We think he has a unique ability to allow this board to see some of the problems that ownership interests face with parking.
My name is Mark Beffert. I'm with Newmark Grubb, Levy Strange Beffert. Appreciate your time today. I wish I was here talking about some of the sexy stuff, like the buildings and stuff that everybody wants to see, but unfortunately, I'm here today to talk about something that's very important to me as well as the community. So I strongly encourage you to approve this parking plan today. We currently own or market 10 major office buildings in downtown Oklahoma City. It represents over 65% of the downtown core space. We currently own 2 parking structures, total about 1,300 parking spaces. That's the City Center East Garage, as well as the Leadership Square Garage, which is underground, 2 floors, as you guys said that you liked Clayco's parking underground. Before this board, you guys approved our expansion of our parking garage, which is the City Center East Garage, by 3 floors. We added 345 spaces. We were pre-committed at 130% of those spaces prior to us even starting the construction of that garage. We had to shut down a floor of that garage, and our tenants were severely hampered by having to use Debbie's shuttle service to allow for us to park those people just during the interim because the current system is full. We currently have a waiting list of over 100 in just our 2 small garages. As Devon began to build their tower, and we continue to see this renaissance that we're seeing, we ended up leasing 650 spaces in the Devon garage that's attached to their current structure. Our agreement with them was when the new garage is built, and matter of fact, we had that agreement in place prior to the Arts Garage even being conceived. Our agreement with Devon was that we would vacate a good portion of those spaces out of their, actually 100% of those spaces out of the garage when a new city garage is built. So when the new Arts Garage was built, we moved 350 spaces out of the Devon garage into the new Arts Garage. And by the way, I'm one of those people that call Debbie every day saying, I need parking spaces. I have about 150 of those spaces on her waiting list. I would pay for them today if she would give them to me, because I could use them. We currently park over 1,500 people in the current system. And right now, so we take a very proactive approach on how we handle our tenants. We know where everyone parks, and we help secure those parking spaces, because when I have somebody come to me and says, I want to lease space, one of the first questions they ask are, where do I park? And I tell them, I will get parking for you. at times. I have no idea how I'm going to do it, but at the end of the day, I'm able somehow to maneuver it. But I will tell you, I've lost several lease transactions because I cannot provide parking. When you look at the vacant space that we have in the portfolio that we oversee, we need about 1,000 spaces today to lease that space. Part of the reason we can't lease some of that space is because we can't park it. We represent Mr. Cotter out of San Antonio that has the old Liberty Bank or the Chase Bank building, which is now called Cotter Ranch Tower. And a portion of that space can't get leased because, as Debbie just pointed out, the Santa Fe parking garage is full at well over oversell capacity that one would normally see within a parking structure. So this coupled, and this is a key point, this coupled with the changing work environment. We're seeing companies go from hard wall offices to open space concept, so they're putting more people in their space than they were before. So if you look at the city code for a building, they call it 500,000 or 600,000 square feet, buildings that are being proposed over the next few months, to meet code. The Clayco facility, if you heard, they just said that they're going to build a 1,400 space parking garage. At an oversell capacity of 20-25%, that's going to put it at about 1,700 to 1,800 spaces. You take their structure at 500,000 square feet, their parking ratio will only be 3.5 per 1,000. I will tell you today, and if you want the stats, I can give them to you on the employees that are in my buildings and the average space, it's well over 4 per 1,000. So Clayco is going to need spaces once they fill OG&E and that vacant space, just to lease space to the occupants in the office space. They're going to need space outside of their own tower. So you add that to all the visitors. You talk about the retail. People want to park. People need to park. Eventually, we're going to have a downtown grocery store. To attract a downtown grocery store, what are you going to need? You're going to have parking. A downtown grocery store will not come without a significant amount of parking for people to access that grocery store. It's my belief, and we haven't done this in the past, buildings were built in the prior days without parking. Structures went up without a consideration of parking. It was done by public with COPTA. It's my belief that good policy going forward would be to build parking with existing structures today and not rely on the public system for that. Yes, we need a public system. We have to have that. I think it needs to go hand in hand. Clayco, and I think Debbie alluded to this, we are a vehicular state. We don't have the public transportation that limits the amount of cars that people. We don't, in my belief, I don't have a study on this, but what I see is more people are driving one at a time. We don't carpool as much as some other cities. I believe we're heading in the right direction from a public transit standpoint, but we're 20-plus years away until we even begin to move the needle to needing less parking spaces for the amount of traffic that we're having downtown Oklahoma City. So I will just close and say this, that if these parking structures are not built, the existing downtown office space will be significantly hampered. Thank you.
Next, Mr. Darcy, who is with the developer Hines, is going to address the parking needed for this project, but also when you look at large-scale developments around the world, why you have to have this type of parking.
Madam Chairman, members of the committee, thank you for allowing me to stand before you here this morning. I want to try and focus my remarks on three distinct areas. Why the shortage? We've heard people talk about there being a shortage. Why this development needs to build the amount of parking that we've designed and are requesting, and why we've designed the parking the way that we have. This is not the first rodeo for me relative to figuring out how do you build parking in cities that don't have robust public transportation. I've spent a career in working around in the Midwest, and it always begins and ends with parking. And the biggest challenge that developers have, and I think is one of the reasons why you haven't had parking built, as Mark was just saying, with previous developments is that the economics are generally upside down. And the only way that parking does get built in commercial projects, not the only way, the vast majority of times is when there's public assistance. This will be one of the first projects that we've done in a Midwestern city outside of Chicago or Minneapolis where we're not requiring or asking for public assistance to do the parking. The economics of building parking are very extreme, and you can't get the rental rates. And what ends up happening is the parking rates. What ends up happening is that the office ends up subsidizing the parking, which pushes your office rates up. So the answer would be, well, sure, Tom, just build less parking, and that would make everybody in this room a whole lot happier, including us. But I'm not sure that that's really economically feasible. So let me tell you why I think what the market dynamics are relative to parking and why we have the shortage, or why collectively we have the shortage here. Number one, in spite of all the green initiatives, people in the Midwest, myself included, we like our cars, we like to drive. And there are a lot of people that continue, even with the options of buses and riding their bike or walking, continue to drive. The public transportation options here are limited. That's not unusual. That's very consistent across the Midwest. What is a bit unusual is what Mark was referring to in terms of buildings being built in an underparked capacity. You've had the benefit of many headquarters relocating or expanding here, Devon, Sandridge, Continental, but they brought a lot of people downtown, which has put pressure on the parking system. The other thing, I believe it was Mark that alluded to, that really is a key point I really hope we can take away from this today. I'm going to use the word densification. I should have Googled that to see if it really is a word, but go with me on it this morning. But essentially what we're seeing across America, even though I'm just a Midwest guy, we're seeing it in our portfolio, and it's a manic trend with corporate America trying to reduce costs. That's nothing new to anybody in this room, but one way they're trying to do that is in lowering occupancy costs. So how do you put more people in the same amount of space? So if you went back a decade ago and said, what is the metrics in terms of how office space is used, you'd have one person in approximately 400 to 500 square feet. Okay, now that's not the size of their office, that's just taking the number of people on a floor and dividing by the size of the floor. We are building a headquarter for Northwestern Mutual today in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, a project I'm leading, and their ratio is one person for every 130 rentable square feet. So that gives you a sense as to how far that metric is coming. Now, I'll grant you that's out on the farther end of the spectrum in terms of densification and in terms of efficiency. And they're doing it by virtually eliminating the private office. They only have 10% of their space in private office. They have hoteling, they have benching, they have free addressing. You come in, you punch a pad on the wall, tells you where you're going to sit for that day. But that is the trend. And that's a really important thing, I think, for this committee and for this room to understand, because that's going to it is happening in your city. Now, maybe it's not to that extreme, and it's not just happening in new projects. Everybody that's renewing a lease, whether they're coming downtown, staying downtown, all these companies are getting on the bandwagon, figuring out how do we build space more efficiently, how do we use space more efficiently. So if you built two 499 Sheratons side by side, one 10 years ago, one today, what is going to end up happening is we're putting about 25% more people into the same envelope. And those 25% more people in the same envelope are 25% more parkers or 25% more people. So it isn't just a phenomena of new office construction. It's affecting how people are using space today. So as you densify in the urban environment, if you don't have alternative ways of getting there, those folks are going to be driving. And that's a big part of the economics behind why we believe that we have to build the amount of parking that we're asking to build. Just take Devon for a quick example. When they opened the Energy Center approximately 2 years ago, their ratio was one person for 400 square feet. In the course of 2 years, Shannon has had the privilege of doing 6 different restacking, not a complete restack, but reconfigurations of different departments. And in 2 years, they've gone from 1 per 400 to 1 per 320. And they haven't added any more parking. So They're hiring more people, they're bringing more jobs, more people to Oklahoma City. That's all a great thing, and we all know what the economic benefits of that are to the overall city. But they're adding more people, but they're not adding more parking. So part of the parking that we're proposing to build, particularly on that northeast corner, is to help serve the overflow that's coming out of, but a very small part. I'll give you the exact metrics in just a moment. Let me talk about what we're asking for. It's a 625,000 square foot office building. It's approximately 2,100 parking spaces. We believe, based on everything I just told you and somewhat collaborated by our friends at Clayco, we're asking for 3 per 1,000, 3 spots per 1,000 square feet leased for the parking. So if you do the simple math on that, that is 1,800 spaces just for the office alone. We need approximately 75 spaces for what I'll call the retail, and that retail comes in 2 buckets. It's the retail that we're proposing to build along Sheridan, going down to Walker, but as you also may be aware, we have a retail component within the building. That retail will require dedicated, particularly if it's something along the lines of a bank, they're going to want reserved parking on the first floor there. So we think there's 75 spots for retail. And that leaves a grand total of 184 spots left over for the overflow, if you will, from the Devon Energy Center. So that's the math that we come up with to justify asking for 2,100 cars of parking that we've distributed between the 2 garages that you've seen. As a developer and a person who has to go out and bring capital, okay, we have to go out and bring institutional risk capital to fund this project. We have to be able to convince those investors that we can lease office space and that we have the appropriate amount of parking in order to secure their investment and return their capital. The challenge is we can't build a building, and more importantly, we can't finance a building if we're in a market that has limited public transportation, currently strained parking capacity. Part of our leasing strategy is to try and attract tenants that are currently in the suburbs to bring them downtown. That's very difficult when people don't have to pay for parking in the suburbs and also have much better ratios. It's a market that we've already heard that is challenged existing today. Let me just briefly on the economics. Our net rents, the net rents that we're charging the office tenants on average are $27 net. So that's exclusive of tax and operating expenses. That's about 80% higher than what Mark would be charging in a Class A, approximately 15 net. Is that a fair proxy? Pardon? Fair assessment. Our parking rates are $170 versus $110. So we are building a product that's that's beyond the top of the market. We need parking. We need to have something other than a brand new shiny office building with a deli in it, and parking is the key. That's one way we can really differentiate ourselves in this market, is being able to provide safe, secure, and appropriate amount of parking. The last thing I want to talk about is, we have spent a lot of time thinking about what is the most efficient way, what's the most responsible way, what's the most sensitive to the community way of laying out and building this parking. It is a lot of parking. How do we integrate this into the fabric of the community? And I think John's done a great job, John Picard. One thing is someone says, well, gee, just build less parking. I think hopefully I've demonstrated that building less parking is not an effective winning strategy for leasing the building or for securing our anchor tenant with Devon. The other notion is that, well, why can't you take the parking and go down? Or why can't you take the parking and put it under the office building? So here's the simple metrics. The least expensive garage is the one that we designed, which I'm going to call the standalone. It doesn't touch the building. That's about $15,000 per stall. That's a construction cost. It doesn't include land, doesn't include financing. That's just a pure hard construction cost. If you take that stall and put it under the building, so you build a podium of parking, put the tower on top, that takes your parking stall cost to $33,000 a stall. If you say go down, put it underground, that takes you to about $50,000 per stall. So the economics, based on the fact of where we are in our pro forma and what we're having to charge for the office and the parking, we cannot afford economically. We won't be able to finance a building that requires us to spend more money on how to design the parking. Lastly, we've heard ideas about, well, what if you took some of the parking, maybe you built around some of the historic buildings, what if you took some of that parking and put it on top of the parking, shrink the parking garages and make them taller, is a simple way of saying it. Right now, we have parking garages that are 9 stories tall. That is the upper limit that we feel. If you go to talk to any credible parking consultant, they're going to tell you you don't want to be taller than 9 stories. People don't like helixing their way up into the clouds. It becomes a less efficient structure, which means it's more costly to build. So we feel that we've taken every step that we can in conjunction with the design team to try and come up with the best solution of having to provide parking on the scale that we're requesting. And that's, unless there's any questions, I can turn it over to you.
Is that the end of your presentation so far? Is Mr. Picard going to speak?
Yes, we have all the speakers announced. We've got
okay,
a list of
thank
people.
you.
Next, I'm going to have Larry Nichols address this project as it relates to Devon.
I never thought it'd be more fun talking about parking than about oil prices, but here I am. Right. Devon is pleased to be in a position where we can continue to expand our business. We obviously would like to need to have that expansion take place adjacent to our building, in a building close by where we can have the community that's so important to create the right momentum. We existed earlier in existence where we were scattered in 6 buildings, scattered all around downtown, isolated silos. That didn't work very well. We do need the parking. Previous speakers talk about that. We need to keep our momentum going. We need to keep the momentum in the city going. I had the pleasure yesterday, along with 1,000 other people, of attending the mayor's State of the City speech, very moving, where he talked about that the city now has the highest rank in population in the United States that we've ever had in our city's history. Listed all of the magazines and other rating agencies that list where we are as a desirable place to live for young people, for people who are retiring across the spectrum. We've got the momentum going. We will lose it at some time. That's just the nature of things. That's just sort of the history of the world. But we have it now. Let's not lose it. Devon is proud to be able to participate in helping a multi-tenant get built. The last multi-tenant building that got built in Oklahoma City was 1984, 31 years ago. It shows you how long it can last when you lose that momentum. It can last for a long time. We can help build a multi-tenant building. It's an ideal location because it helps round out, as will be if the Clayco project is approved and goes forward, it will be the last site available to help fill out the Myriad Gardens. Devon was exceedingly proud to have provided most of the funds that helped redo the Myriad Gardens, and it's a great joy to see that park being used now. By replacing the old buildings that are there now, that are dilapidated and worn out, with a new high-rise, a new multi-tenant building, will help keep that momentum going, will play a vital role in continuing the growth in this city. And I would encourage you to make that positive choice, to keep what we have going in the city going. Thank you.
Next is Clay Kimker.
Good morning. I'm beginning my 44th year as a real estate professional in downtown Oklahoma City. Every minute of that has been spent in downtown Oklahoma City. I started out with the development team at Liberty Bank, which is now the Chase Tower, and when that assignment concluded, I became the first leasing agent at Liberty Tower, which was no small task in those days, and I wasn't always an advocate of parking, I can tell you, but I became so very quickly when I realized we were competing against the very nice buildings in the suburbs who had free parking and a lot of it, and we didn't have very much downtown. There was another complication as well, because as well as COPTA has done, and I applaud them, the financing of those parking garages was on tax-exempt financing, and therefore a building owner could not lease parking spaces. They could only be leased by the individual employees of the tenant. That created a very burdensome system for the tenants who really didn't like it. It was much easier to move to the suburbs and just simply pay parking with the rent, which was already figured in. Along the way, as all of the young people do over time, you tend to get promoted, and I became president of Liberty's real estate operations and was also appointed as receiver of 20 North Broadway by the federal court when a developer who had built a building without parking gave it back to the lender. Both those buildings were about 40% vacant when I came back to that task, and I did realize at that point how difficult parking was for a building owner in Oklahoma City as we attempted to fill those. And that was really on the initiative that Mayor Norick had taken and followed through on for MAPS. We started to see people who wanted to come back downtown. The momentum continued. We were able to fill those buildings, but it was very difficult. Along the way, Mayor Norick appointed me, along with Ford Price, to the COTPA board as advisors on parking. We worked very closely with COTPA to try and encourage changing the financing, building more interesting, more beautiful garages. We worked with ADG on one that I think was very beautiful. You can see another that was recently done along those lines. So I think we've come a long way in that regard. But we are still short of parking. I don't need to add to that. You've heard that spoken of today. But I want to speak to you secondarily from my role as president of Devon Realty Advisors. Devon is an international company. I have leased and built office spaces in 13 foreign countries around the world: Cairo, Rio and Buenos Aires, Shenzhen, China. We had 800,000 feet in Houston, 800,000 feet in Calgary, Fort Worth, Denver. Never once have I ever considered leasing an office space as an international company that did not have connected, safe, and readily available parking for all of my employees. I'm in constant contact with my counterparts in other major corporations around the world. They won't lease it either. So those are the very people that we're trying to invite to send either corporate headquarters or portions of their headquarters to Oklahoma City. And I assure you, they will not lease in our downtown without safe, connected, and ample parking. Thank you very much.
Next will be Shannon Fetz.
Good morning. Shannon Fetz. I am the Director of Real Estate and Facilities for Devon. I'm not exactly sure why they put me after Larry and Clay and before John, so just bear with me. I'm kind of the filling, maybe the mayonnaise on the sandwich, perhaps. I stand before you as a man with what I'll refer to as a fortunate challenge. We, as Larry has touched on, we are growing. We have grown tremendously. If you look at our projections from 12 months ago and looked at where we thought our head count would be at this point, we have exceeded 2015's projection points from 12 months ago, and we're just started 2015. That's a great problem to have, unless, of course, you're the Director of Real Estate and Facilities, and your job is to find office space and parking. We have really scoured downtown. We've worked with folks like Mark and many other property owners downtown to help us find office space. I think you've heard talk from Tom and everyone else. We have looked at our own headquarters. We have continued, and we are underway with the project in the building now to add more seats to the building. We are scouring and trying to do that responsibly, where we're providing good office space, but we need more seats than we have. We had about 3,000. We're going to be about 3,200 by the end of the year in the headquarters. It's a lot of seats, but nevertheless, we still have about 215,000 square feet of space outside the headquarters, full. And Mark, being kind as he is, takes my call every day knowing that I'm going to beg him for more office space if something has come up. That is where we are. We are hoping to be able to find an opportunity to bridge that gap. With the growth, as we've touched on, is the parking challenge. Today, Devon Energy Center's parking garage is 135% leased. Mark did not mention that he had gone down to 350 spaces. He's down to 100 now. I think he may have gotten the news this morning. We may ask him to move a few more out still. So hopefully he doesn't shoot me, and that does not allow me to have more office space going forward. He still likes us for some reason. I don't know why. That is the challenge we're up against. We see, with an opportunity of 499, two great opportunities. Obviously, we anticipate putting somewhere in the neighborhood of 1,400 to 1,500 seats in 499 West Sheridan. That helps our growth. It helps us take the 250,000 square feet today, which will very well be 300,000 square feet by the end of 2017 when this building would deliver, and slide those folks under a campus-style arrangement. Certainly not our building, but it's attached to. It's close. It allows to continue on some of that one-roof scenario that we desperately have and desperately need to continue on at Devon Energy Center. Today, we're back in 4 buildings, counting the headquarters. Before this building would deliver, we may very well be back in 5 and 6, trying to figure out where we go. Clearly focused on staying close to the headquarters. Those aren't fun conversations to have to choose the employees that we have to send 4 blocks away. No one ever likes to receive that well, because we have learned over our last 2 years of occupancy that being together in one building has helped our collaboration as a company tremendously. It has helped part of our growth that we talked about over the last 12 months by being collectively. It is very important to us. So the 1,400 to 1,500 seats we hope to add in 499, of course, also requires parking. That is a huge part of our need. And lastly, and equally important, this is an opportunity for us, once again, to team with a world-class architect in Picard Chilton and a world-class international developer in Hines to develop a product we know well. They developed our headquarters. It allows us to turn our employees into a building that they're very familiar with. It will feel very similar, 10-foot floor-to-ceiling glass. A lot of the things that John will talk about because, well, he's the architect and he knows a lot more about it than me, but what we can deliver is a secure growth for our folks and in a space that they're very familiar with in the headquarters now. Thank you very much.
Members of the committee, the next portion of our presentation will focus on the actual design of the building. And as Shannon alluded to, what you have is another opportunity for Hines and Mr. Picard to team up as they did on the Devon Energy Center. And we think that's a wonderful opportunity to additionally enhance this skyline and bring a world-class project to the city, as they did with the Devon Energy Center. And with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Picard.
Good morning. You know, if one just kind of plopped into this room, one might be confused to think that 499 Sheridan is about parking. And indeed, parking is a foundational component to the success of it. But what 499 Sheridan is about a really extraordinary story. And it's a success story that you may not appreciate it as much as you should. Mr. Nichols talked on it. We talked about the renaissance that you've experienced here in Oklahoma City. And we have the privilege of practicing globally. We're probably in 12 to 14 cities across the United States. And the Oklahoma City story is unique. All of our clients would beg to know how to be Oklahoma City. And Tom Darcy talked about, we're doing the headquarters with Tom for Northwestern Mutual. They've been down here multiple times trying to understand what makes Oklahoma City special. And I think what it is, it's about you're working together to fulfill a common goal, which is to allow the great successes, the OG&Es, the Devon Energies, to continue to do what they do, to grow, to bring jobs, and create value. So it's my pleasure today to talk about how 499 Sheridan is going to do that, and frankly, how it's going to continue to create a fabulous city. Because that's what's special about Oklahoma City. It's not just a bunch of office buildings. It's about a magic that we've been able to achieve. I'd like to tell you that we don't do it by ourselves. This process has been particularly valuable in working with planning and listening to you. I think you'll see today, whether you choose to agree with it or not, we have endeavored to listen very carefully to your comments, and we've really tried to be responsive. And frankly, we think the project has gotten better in every one of its iterations. The other thing I want to underscore is, for me, this is personal. I said it before, I'm going to say it again. This is a big deal. This project, my relationship with Devon Energy, is the most important relationship I've had in my professional life. So when I'm here to commit to you that we're doing everything we know how, it's very real. We'd like to think that you can look out your window and you can see the magic that's occurred at Devon Energy Center, and the same team is here today to deliver on these, what you might think is promises, but these are really commitments. So fortunately, my colleagues from Bob Stern's office did a lot to kind of cover where we are. You know the site. I'll go through quickly our planning strategies, but I'd like to talk a little bit, not just about parking, but about what we think is going to make 499 Sheridan special. The first of all, Myriad Gardens is an extraordinary success story. And when we were designing Devon Energy Center, we didn't fully know that would happen. We went on a hunch, and what we did in the design of Devon is to bring Myriad Garden across Sheridan and engage it into the Energy Center. We're really trying that same strategy now in the design of 499 Sheridan. The idea is to engage the project into Myriad Gardens, to engage it and begin to have a dialogue with Devon Energy Center. And let's go ahead. So here is an image that establishes the context. The goal is to really, and I think the words that were used earlier in this morning's presentation, is frame Myriad Garden. And I support that. We are being particularly sensitive to how the new tower can not only engage the park, but be respectful of its new neighbor to the south, the beautiful OG&E tower that we're hopeful will move forward soon, and also how to create an architecture that will be respectful of Devon Energy Center. Here, one of the big ideas, just to kind of get oriented, is we've rotated the building approximately 15 degrees, and we're creating an urban garden. And what we're attempting to do, and Sheila will talk in greater detail, our landscape architect, is bring that urban room to life. It's surrounded by active uses, retail spaces. It is not a windblown plaza. It is a place that is going to be beautiful and is going to engage the citizens of Oklahoma City. Here you can see the basic structure. If we had a model here, what you'd really see is when we started designing our building, we had a sense what Bob Stern's office might be doing for OG&E. And we felt it was appropriate that they site the building where it did, right on the park. And what we've done is we've literally rotated the building a little bit, that sort of southern corner to the west. And what it does is it provides that great urban room, but it also allows for the two buildings to form a really nice conversation. Instead of having a kind of an unbroken wall, you have a bit of a dance of these two structures. And when one looks north from the OG&E building, instead of looking at the southern face of our building, you actually look into the urban room in the garden and the sort of the eastern face of our project. The basics, the project is approaching 700,000 square feet in the office tower. Much of that is for retail and amenity spaces that are located in the lower floors. You've heard repeatedly throughout this morning's presentation, we're delivering approximately 2,100 cars, 1,400 in the western deck, and another 600 plus in the north deck. These images begin to show what becomes, we think, rather special about the building. Tom Darcy could give you a 5-hour seminar on what it takes to deliver a really compelling, efficient, and successful commercial office building. But in it is about efficiency. To be effective today in this market, and that's really what we do as a firm, is we design the homes for some of the leaders in American business. You have to deliver the efficiencies. And those efficiencies typically come from a building that is grounded in practical interior planning. So in essence, we have, in the case of 499 Sheridan, developed a really elegant box. It's been carefully shaped. There are some unique geometries, but it can plan with those efficiencies. What you can begin to see on the image on my right in the northeast, when you're looking northeast, is that the tower slims, and there's about an 85-foot wide face, which rises vertically and extends beyond the roof with a fully enclosed wall. As Megan said in their strategy, all the mechanicals, all the cooling towers, all of that will be clad, and you will not see it. And it gives the building a certain vertical grace. Here you see it from a series of different vantage points. You can see how the parking garages are kept as low in scale as possible, obviously in order to size to deliver the program requirement of 2,100 cars. We've also begun to make some modifications, which I'll highlight as we go through the presentation. Okay, let's just go ahead and jump in. So, just orientation. We'll start on the tower and the western podium. And then let's go to the... trying to catch up? It's okay. I won't... We okay? Beautiful. Okay. So the image on the right, you're standing on Hudson, and you're looking north. The OG&E tower is just off the left of the page, but it will be spectacular. To echo some of the comments made earlier, we love, frankly, the complementary strategies that are being employed. We think it's going to make Oklahoma City a richer place. And so the fact that you have a building which is linking to some of the historic character of the existing buildings in Oklahoma City, we think is wonderful, allows the Devon composition to have its own unique character, and we think the variety of skylines and building placements is really going to create a rich skyline. I think, I'm digressing, but that's okay. Right now, Devon is wonderful as an object in the skyline, and there's not much that surrounds it. I think with the completion of 499 Sheridan and the OG&E Tower, Oklahoma City really has a skyline because you have a series of significant foothills. Foothills is probably a mischaracterization of 27-story towers, but then rise up to the Devon Energy Tower. We think that's going to be terrific. So the character of our project is been considered on the outside because we are grateful to have Devon as a prime tenant. The exterior is going to be in the spirit of much of what you see today in Devon Energy. Highly articulated enclosure that is going to form a great conversation between the two towers. We've also paid attention to what the project will look like at night. Just as the OG&E Tower will have a beautifully lit loggia at the top of the building, we too have a crown. So the upper nearly 30 feet will be illuminated softly with a series of highlights on every 5-foot center, so that when one comes into Oklahoma City and you're driving in from the airport, as the experience I frequently have, you will have these beautiful crowns all dancing in the skyline. And I think it's going to be quite magical. A typical floor plate, I won't bore you with why that works, but I can assure you it's highly efficient. This is a cross-section cut east-west. You're looking north. It shows the relationship between the parking deck and the tower. This is an important plan. I'm going to take a little bit of time on it. This is the street-level plan that we showed you in December. And I think we had something like about a little over 8,000 square feet of active uses. And much of that, we believe, will be retail, and we've had conversations. You were very clear in your concern about were we properly providing for an active experience on Sheridan. And the reality, this plan was generated with a bias toward parking efficiency. We took those comments to heart, and we have meaningfully transformed the plan, which you see here. We've done a couple things. First of all, a criticism, which was fair, is that the depth might be a little constraining, and we weren't delivering on I'll call it the western component, a significant amount of space. And I think it was said earlier this morning, if you don't provide this space now, it's never going to happen. And so what we've done is on that western space that's directly opposite the elementary school, we've enhanced that to over 5,100 square feet, which Tom Darcy would tell you, if market conditions are right, would support a meaningful restaurant. In addition to just providing the space, we also want to make sure that it works. And so, for instance, it's a little hard to see, but we have 2 service strategies for that restaurant. One is we have a dock immediately adjacent to it there. Yeah, exactly, thanks. That would allow a van to park and move in to support the restaurant. The other is we've created a path that will take you directly to the major loading dock and allow for service access to that restaurant. So the goal is we are designing for success. Now, no one can tell you today that that's going to be a spectacular restaurant. But I can tell you that when the market conditions are right, we have the ability to accommodate that. I'll also tell you, let me just be blunt, because you say, well, why didn't you show me that before? This doesn't come for free. We lost well over 50 cars in doing this. We've completely redesigned the parking system. There is a meaningful financial burden that our client has agreed to carry on to provide that. And I think we all agree it makes the project better and it makes your city stronger. And it's the right thing to do, and we recommend this with great conviction. The restaurant, we think, to be successful, I say restaurant, that's my hope someday, something cool, vital, needs to have a vertical dimension. And so not only have we lost parking in the street level, we've carved a vertical space so that we have nominally about 21 feet floor to floor. We'll probably be able to deliver 17 feet clear, something like that. And then what we're also proposing is a kind of a glass beacon on the corner of Walker and Sheridan, which you can see right there. Also, at some point, I'm going to take a little time and get into the famous parking enclosure, because these renderings don't quite do it justice. But we think that this is a very important component, because one of the comments that came out this morning in OG&E is, how do you sort of modulate this system? And what we showed you in December was a wall which was modulated on 20-foot bays, but just kind of came and it ended. Here, we think with the glass beacon as an exclamation mark, that it really is appropriate. It has a conversation with the elementary school across the street, and it makes that whole experience richer. Now, we're going to get into, at one point in the presentation, our strategy on the integration of historic buildings. This is a study we did, and we are now recommending for your consideration as to, we originally, when we introduced the beacon here, it's a blur, over Christmas, it was a beacon. What we're now preparing to offer up is to go ahead and restore the sign and install the sign in that, glass cylinder, and we think we could make something that would really be quite special, that treats it in a very special way. And this is an opportunity for consideration. There are a lot of different ways to handle the sign. As you know, in the original proposal, we were prepared to contribute it to the Historic Society. It's really something to be discussed. But we think this could be quite special and would really contribute to the vitality of Sheridan Street.
Can I ask you a
Yeah, of
question real
course.
quick?
Yeah.
Is that all scaled right? Is the bus station sign really that big?
To the best of our ability, it is scaled correctly. Yep. Now, we could be off by 10%, but I don't think we're too far off. Yeah, right. Also, but I should have said, it'd be easy, you should interrupt at any time for questions, because there's a lot of material that we're covering, and what happens is, we're so close to it, we'll just skip over something that we say, of course, and you may be wondering.
We'll have lots of time afterwards to discuss, and after you finish your presentation, we're going to take a 5-minute break, just so everybody has a chance to answer phone calls or other things.
Okay, very good.
Thanks.
Okay. So this is just the, I'll call it the podium floor. This is the level that will link north through the north parking deck and then across Hudson Street and engage back into Devon Energy Center. So the zone that you see that is south-facing, that looks over the urban room that Megan's creating for OG&E, and there's a little terrace right there. It will be quite beautiful, receives southern light, brings activity to the street, and then we have a fitness center in that kind of purpley gray zone that looks the roof terrace. Okay? So here you are, you're standing in the urban room looking to the north. We think there's a great opportunity for synergy between these two urban spaces. We envision that they are both vital, active uses. One of the things we've talked about in our team, and it was mentioned with the OG&E presentation, is we're hopeful that the food service provider that manages some of the operations for the building would also provide carts that in proper weather could come out and could serve that. So the plaza is truly vital and used throughout the appropriate portions of the year. These images are fairly pathetic, at least on my screen, but we're we're very excited about the lobby. And why do I say this? I guess it's technically out of your purview, but what's important is these public spaces, it's the lobby, because the enclosure is so transparent, they make a meaningful contribution to the public domain. I mean, I can't help, last night I had dinner at the Park House, and the Devon lobby is magical. The sort of the glowing lantern, the wood screens. So although this is not like that, it is in the spirit of that. We have wonderful wood walls, beautifully lit with this fabulous geometric pattern. We're actually hopeful to do wood on the ceiling, although we haven't shown it in this rendering. This is going to be quite spectacular. And then what's not shown here is if you go just to the left through the garden, you have the western-facing sloped wall of the Devon Auditorium. This is really going to be a really spectacular urban space. Okay, So here we are. One of the things that I probably didn't point out on my street-level plan, I think it's important, is we see this as really an urban campus. And for Devon to achieve its mission, it needs to tie its team together. Larry commented, it's just not effective if you're disconnected. And so a Skybridge connection is important. We've also got a street-level pedestrian walkway. So you've come out, this is the north entrance to the lobby. You come out of that door, and I'm literally standing on a walkway that goes directly across Hudson and goes directly into the western door of the Devon Energy Center. The details of whether it's signalized and how we do that are above my pay grade at the moment. But we think that street-level connection is important, as long as the conventional crossings at Sheridan. This is the south elevation along Sheridan. You can now begin to see the glass beacon on the far left. An image looking east on Sheridan that shows some of those show windows, which I will tell you now, we no longer have show windows. We used to have a lot of windows. We still have a lot of windows. The vast majority are directly connected and open into active use spaces. There are literally only 4, and each of those are adjacent to their retail. So the reality is, and we can go back to the plan at some point if you want to go into the details, these become true windows into the uses that's within. One of the questions that came up before, and frankly, as an appropriate one, these renderings do not display the care and the attention to detail that we think is appropriate for the parking garage. So although it's not a part of the digital, let's go ahead if we can, and let's just bring over, and I'm going to show you a little model, and then, I don't know, I'm probably breaking all the protocol. Maybe during the break, we have a full-size.
This is fine.
Yeah, okay, let's put it right there.
Is there any way to get it closer to the members?
Why don't you walk it around, and I'll talk about it a little bit.
Okay.
What you're seeing is a snapshot of the base of the parking. It's modeled on Sheridan, but it would be typical to Main Street as well, where you have a very rich articulated wall. We're delighted, although we don't know all the details of what Bob Stern's doing across the street, but we think that this is going to do a good job of capturing some of the warmth and flavor of OG&E. It's much more pedestrian in its feel, much more human scaled. The pilasters that march on 20-foot centers have a certain soft fluting. They're going to be lit at night. They're going to glow. The show windows are very carefully detailed. And then you can begin to see what we referred to in the previous presentation as the GFRC screen. Because GFRC is something that few of us are familiar with, this is the first time I've ever used it, we went ahead and we said, let's build a piece of it. So during the break, we actually have a small size chunk of GFRC that I would be delighted to show you, let you touch it. It's really quite remarkable. It almost feels like a stone, but it's concrete. It's got a nice texture and it's got a nice look, got a nice warmth. So that's a long-winded way of saying there has been great care paid to the parking. We think it is going to be terrific, and it's going to contribute to the quality of the urban experience in downtown Oklahoma City. So this is almost impossible to understand, and over the break with the model and the full-size mock-up, we can probably talk that through. Okay? So the north garage, I didn't spend a lot of time today, and I probably should have. I did in the informal session in December talking about the service strategy, but you may recall from December, the alley remains open. Nothing has changed in terms of that. So we've literally conceived of the project as two separate blocks, and we use the alley as it was intended as a service path to serve all the projects that surround it. One of the comments that was made is could we make the north garage a slightly stronger, urban participant? And so in looking at that, we're proposing here a modification to the northeast corner where, in some respect, in the spirit of Carpenter Square, we have chamfered it to give the corner a little more character. We've increased the amount of transparency on the corner. This plan before you is where we were a month ago, and there was a concern about the depth. So you can, why don't you toggle back and forth, so you can see where we were and now, where we are. Hines has had a series of folks test it and are very comfortable that the new enhanced area and depth can support a broad variety of uses. And then just a typical upper floor plate. And again, I will tell you, all these changes don't come for free. For instance, on this north deck, there was a loss of 22 cars, and you've already heard the economic value of that. And these are just the elevations that go around. Now, this is where you're looking at the southeast corner of the north deck. That will be a very transparent circulation core. You will see people waiting for elevators, stairs. The bridge going from 499 Sheridan is coming in from the left, and the bridge connecting back to Devon Energy Center goes off to the right. Here you are, you're on Main Street looking to the southeast. Okay. So one of the real challenges for the project is the existing context. And I will tell you, I believe passionately in historic preservation. This is something I have committed myself to my whole life. I have fortunate enough to have two homes, both of which are historic, and one is fully renovated and the other is in process. So this is something we take seriously. The reality is, and I'm going to touch over, we've got lots of experts lined up to talk in detail about it. These structures, charming as they may be, are way beyond their productive lives. And I'm not qualified to talk about the economics. I defer to others. But so what we've done is to do what's right and to say, let's capture what we can. Let's capture some of the magic and let's embrace it and make it contribute to the continued vitality of the city. So we'll go through and point by point and talk about how we've approached the integration of some of the best of these buildings. So on the One North Hudson building, we think that frieze is quite special. And when we pass the model around, I don't know if you noticed, but in the model, it's cast. It's spectacular. I mean, it's going to be richer and better here, I think, than it is in the current building. So are we saving the building? No. That building, just so you know, does not meet the business needs for our clients. Doesn't even come close. So we don't have an option to save it. But we can save what's special, which is that decoration. And here you see it in the rendering about how the frieze runs across the top. The Motor Hotel, we're proposing that we remove carefully the capitals for each of those elements, and we have them reintegrated within the main promenade. So what you're looking at in the lower left is a detail. You've parked your car, you come down the elevators, and so Devon and other tenants will move through this promenade into the main lobby and they will see these elements marching through that, which is in the next slide, just an interior elevation that shows these. Will be carefully lit, carefully preserved, and is going to create a really rich experience for the building. The bus, we've already briefly touched about the sign. So we're proposing, we capture a couple things. First of all, the sign is quite special, and we're proposing that we restore it and reintegrate it in the sort of the southwest corner. We're also struck by the blue tile, and I probably didn't do a sufficient job of outlining it in my previous presentation, but I will here. Let's go on to the next one. What we're proposing is that the blue tile would be engaged in the beacon. In the later generation rendering, we've actually brought the tile down lower so you can see it more, and we've actually used more of it. We've integrated it up those vertical insets as well. So there is a sense of the character and the spirit of the place, but we have not, of course, preserved the exact facade. Here you see it, and it will, and we think that sign will be quite interesting when it's enshrined in the glass beacon. The Carpenter Square is a bit of a challenge. Our experts tell us it is extremely vulnerable, but we are committed to saving as much as we can. We've talked in this presentation about the scroll work at the bottom. We're also open to, if it makes it easier, there is a series of square emblems right above the glass block windows. We'll also be looking at those. And the real question about how much we save, how we use it is, what can we get off the facade that doesn't pulverize? I listened to an engineer a week or so ago going on about the challenge that this is going to present, but we're prepared to take it on. And then what we're proposing here is to take that, and then you can see barely in the green how it's integrated across the top of the retail base on the north garage. So I'd like to introduce my friend and colleague Sheila, who will talk about the public domain.
Thank you. Thank you, John. Good morning, everybody. Glad to be back in Oklahoma City. So I'll take you through the streetscape in the plaza. So John set this up, and everybody has mentioned the continuity and the cues between Myriad Gardens as well as to what happens at Devon Gardens. And now, as we saw from Stern's office, another outdoor room connecting, so that corner is becoming more and more special. So we've shown you some of these things before, and there's some new things as well. So the overall block, the streetscape block, is in concert and cooperation with your streetscape master plan, the 180 plan, the amenity edge condition, as well as the parking, streets parking. And so that would be consistent, and we would celebrate that with the plan material as well as special enhanced paving. And then the next slide just shows the sections of how that looks like. So we have 8-foot clear zones as a minimum condition on Walker and on Sheridan and on Main. So we get that nice open space. We get the understory planting as well as the tree shading as you're walking along the street. So you have the canopy as well as the understory, again in keeping with what else is happening in downtown. And then the bottom section is across Hudson, and it shows you how much bigger the opportunities are there for plaza space. So it's everything from the minimum of the 12-foot clear zone up into 60 feet wide of able to walk through and around really unencumbered. A lot of flexibility. That was really important. We heard that from some of the comments to make sure that we keep flexibility for what might happen in that space to allow for it as programming or events might take place. Next. So the precedent images, the idea of this leafy bosque, leafy canopy, again, you can see from the OG&E sketches we saw earlier, there's a similar bosque quality on that corner. This reflects that with some seating, both some fixed seating, but also we're really relying on more informal seating. So depending on the weather, the day, people can move their chairs and tables to a place that's most comfortable for the surrounding. So those are just some precedent images for that direction. And then we've turned the page, Hudson is on the bottom of your sheet. So this is a little bit of a change. It's sort of a hybrid of a couple of schemes you've seen. One that has evolved into a little bit more orthogonal again and a little more flexible, if you will. So what we have here is a bosque, a grid of trees, basically 22 by 20 feet on center, with very generous landscape plantings, and some trees come out of tree grates. The tree grate areas are to have nodes among the bosque to allow for slightly larger gathering of tables and chairs, if you will. And then all of the paving has some type of enhanced architectural concrete paving. This zone is one zone. The surrounding blocks would be maybe a slightly different pattern. And then John referenced the crosswalk, which would be another pattern. So the idea here was that we wanted these beds to be large enough to feel gardeny, but not so gardeny that we lost the sense of the urban plaza. So we think we've struck a good balance to have both of those happen and have the flexibility as well. Next. Just a little overview perspective from the corner looking down. You can see that sort of you can meander through. The bed areas are really pretty significant. They're 10 feet long by 6 feet wide. That's a pretty good-sized bed area. They're not raised. They're flush with the plaza. And the idea with the plant material for this grove, we're suggesting a grove of Drake elms that would also be the street tree on this area. The surrounding blocks were suggesting a Shumard oak, and in the ground plane plantings, a mixture of evergreen and deciduous. I would say the balance we're striking is going to be about 70% on the evergreen side and the 30% on the deciduous and or seasonal side, and that kind of came from some comments from our client group wanting to make sure that both in winter, spring, summer, and fall, when you're sitting in that lobby looking out, as well as you're looking in, that there is that enough evergreen quality to make it feel rich every month of the year. And then one last little detail was, if you might have seen it in one of the last images, but on Main Street, there's a section between the two buildings. That alley does get closed off, and so the suggestion is to do a piece of green wall there. So there's a transitional zone between the city building and the garage, and it would just be a simple piece of green screen with the vines growing on it. You can see those two precedent images give you a sense of what that would look like. And then we're back to the corner overview. Thank you, and I guess you, Madam Chair, you'd like to take a break and then do questions?
I think that would be great. Actually, we'll probably go to some of the other comments, and then we'll go to the staff comments, and then we'll start talking about questions and comments.
Great.
So,
thank you.
Thank you.
May,
yeah.
We still have several other elements of our presentation that will need to be addressed
Okay.
after the break.
David, yeah, if we could take let's say, 7-minute break.
Very precise.
Or they're around. And let's get back at 11:35. And any of the committee members that want to see the GFRC panel, it's over here somewhere.
It's over here right by the wall.
Okay, thanks.
Scattered throughout. Planning Commission today. Here's the approval, there's the variance.
think, yeah, I've got this.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Nice to meet you. I'm sure we'll talk.
Hey, guys.
Okay, we're going to start back. We let that break go a little bit longer. If our MC, David Box, could come back to the podium. And if Chuck Gainsworth could sit down.
All right. Well, thank you for for paying attention to what we've got and bearing with us. We know it's a lot of information, but we hope it's all information you realize has been thought out and very important to not just this project, but downtown Oklahoma City. The next portion of our project is going to focus on the block as it exists today, and it's going to focus on the economic viability as it stands. Mr. Preftakes is here, and he has extensive experience in renovating older properties and making older properties work when you can. He is a man that not just talks about preservation of old buildings, but he makes it happen. And there are several examples that I'd like to show as we talk. You've got the Hudson Essex building. We've got the garage lofts.
Thank you.
We've got 701 North Broadway. And I think it's important with all three of these buildings. There is a lot of people that wouldn't have tried to do these projects. He was a pioneer in doing some of these projects. So this isn't a man that looks at old buildings and tries to find a way to bring them down. He tries to find a way to make an economic use of the buildings. And so what he was able to do in these is create great projects. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Preftakes to have him explain the economic viability of the block that we're discussing today.
Hello, as you know, I'm Nick Preftakes. I'll make this very brief and really open it to questions. I started acquiring these properties in 2007 and made the last acquisition in 2012. With each acquisition, these properties were listed for lease and actively marketed. To date, I can list on one hand, including what you've read about Good Egg, how many legitimate, credible tenant opportunities I've had, none of which have risen to the level of economics, cost, or even a letter of intent. The reality is that based upon the costs of these acquisitions and the substantial cost of renovation, in whole or in part, and even assuming potential and certainly uncertain opportunities for tax credits, keeping in mind the bus station was built in 1941, not 1936. The highest rate of return that my pencil can calculate is less than 5%. The level of investment that it would take to renovate these buildings is not economic. It does not attract capital, and certainly can't attract lenders. The value of this proposition is now, and always has been, the value of the assemblage. I'll answer any questions.
Tell you what. Okay. Nick, if possible, let's move on with all the presentations, and then hopefully we'll gather all of our questions.
Great.
We have a planning commission meeting, and that will not limit us, except for the fact that we may have to move, maybe continue the meeting to another day if we're not done. So we want to move as quickly as possible.
Okay. Thank you.
You know, I have several items on the Planning Commission. I'm sure Mr. Yokel and the rest of the group would be happy to just wait for us.
Need your office to bring you some lunch.
Yes.
Because you're not going very far, right?
Thank you. And what the next portion of our presentation is going to focus on is the demolition of the 9 buildings that sit in this block. And it is, what this opportunity provides is the fact that these buildings have to come down. And it may not be a happy thought for some, but it is the reality of where we are with these 9 buildings in this block. I think it's important at the outset that we all understand the ordinance that this group is guided by specifically permits these buildings to be torn down. The use of the word should is what you will find through the ordinances. Not shall. It says buildings should be kept. And what that tells us is it's got to be a balancing of the equities. You can't keep every building all the time. And so what you have to do is look at, is it economical? Does it make sense? And we submit to you that the 9 buildings as proposed in this application don't make sense to remain. The city on this block deserves better. This is one of the key pieces of real estate in downtown. There's been so much talk about how it relates to Myriad Gardens, and that is critical. This is a key piece of real estate that deserves something spectacular. It doesn't deserve 9 tired, old, functionally obsolete buildings. And that's what we have today. I think it's important to look at what staff has recommended. They've recommended approval of every building except for the bus station. We have 4 separate independent architectural and engineering studies that were performed on each and every building. So when we come before you today to ask that all 9 buildings be demolished, it's not without careful consideration, not just by us, but independent third parties that specialize in doing this type of review. So I would like to focus on 4 of the buildings specifically, and I'll start with 1 North Hudson. And if any committee members have specific questions on any of the other buildings that I don't cover, please tell me and I will address it. When we look at 1 North Hudson, it's important to note that the historical elements of that building were ripped away in the 80s. They put an entirely new front facade on the street level. The certain elements on the top of the building were significantly damaged and removed. It's our opinion that the remnants of what is there now is functionally obsolete. It does not retain the historic integrity necessary for a building. And when you look at the certain reports, the 2014 MEP Field Observation Report by Alvin Engineering, these are all provided to staff and analyzed as well, they state, any reuse of the building would require a replacement of all mechanical and electrical systems. The existing building floor to height of 8 feet 8 inches with concrete slab structure does not provide the required height to maintain ceiling level consistent with office space in the 21st century. On top of that, the floor plates are very small. So what you have is a building that cannot function with the office demands of our market today. The next building I'll talk about is 17 North Hudson, the Motor Hotel. The same study reports that the structural elements should be evaluated because these items are in dilapidated state. The conditions are unsatisfactory for storage of vehicles or any other type of occupancy. Construction, as is done, does not meet current building code requirements for enclosed occupancy. What you'd have to do is fireproof this building. You'd have to remove the windows. Then you'd have to come up with a solution of barriers. You'd have to come up with a solution for rain that's blown in from the wind. It's functionally obsolete. It can't work. And as Mr. Preftek said, when you look at the return you get on this, his analysis focused on the absolute high end of this market, probably exceeded the high end of the market. And what this building would bring is 1.27% return. It won't happen. You won't get the capital you need to make it work. Next is the 400 West Main, or Carpenter Square. This may be one of the most in bad shape buildings. It is crumbling. You know, when you look at the pictures that you've seen, you see the plywood that's in place. Originally, that was windows. At some point over in the past, somebody concreted those in. It's lost its historic integrity. It's lost the charm that it once had. We believe the elements that we are capturing from the building and working into our design is the best case scenario for the building. It's honoring the building. It's allowing people to have the good thoughts they might have had about it, but it removes the building. It doesn't let it sit there and continue to deteriorate. There's no way you can incorporate that into the site. The structural field observation by Walter P. Moore provided the building cladding consisting of glazed tiles is in poor condition. There's presence of asbestos at multiple locations. And finally, the Kendall Heaton Associates study said the building as a whole would be deemed hazardous and unsuitable for human occupancy. Multiple environmental issues, including mold, mildew, and standing water. Simply put, the building cannot work. Finally, the bus station. This is the one building staff recommends denial on the demolition. You saw the revised drawing done by Mr. Picard where we are going to incorporate the tiles and also the sign. And I think Most would agree when we think of the bus station, the thing that strikes us is the sign. That's the unique element of that building. But the same 4 studies were done on this building. First, the field study by Alvin Engineering said all mechanical, electrical, and plumbing systems are non-functional. The Kendall Heaton study said the building as a whole would be deemed hazardous, unsuitable for human occupancy, and subject to condemnation. The structural field observation notes that the roofing is in failed condition, requires replacement. Significant water infiltration throughout the entire interior of the building. You've got excessive mold growth, and you have asbestos throughout the entire building. What you have is a building that can't function. What you have is a building whose time has passed. And it's worth noting, this building was designed and built for a specific use. It was built for a bus station. That use was a problem to downtown. It was a problem for the vibrancy of downtown, and it had to be removed. That's what the building was built for, a use that had to be removed. And so what we're left with is not warm thoughts of this grand building, but I think we're left with the problems that this building created. I would submit that the integration of the sign and the tiles is a much more respectful way to treat this building than retain it. Now, Mr. Preftex alluded to the story in the paper about the good egg, and he told you that wasn't a real deal. It was nothing more than somebody kicking tires. Like anybody who owns property understands, you're going to get phone calls. But it never got to the level of a deal. It never got to the level where somebody had numbers and they could sit down and actually make something happen. Let's assume that a restaurant could go in there. To what end? Maybe it would work. Maybe it wouldn't work. Maybe an office would work. And then maybe that office would vacate. What you have as presented is a real deal. It's a real opportunity. It's certainty, it's respecting the block, and it's respecting the park, not the hope that something could work. I think it's critical that we focus on what preservation is about. Now, this board hears cases all the time that requires demolition, and there's a lot of talk that gets brought up about what preservation means. What it means is not saving every old building. It can't mean that. What it means is it is a respectful eye to the past, and if we can make something work and it's feasible, great. Nobody wants to talk about the economics, but you have to. Without an investor, without capital, things don't work. So when we analyze preservation, it's a process. It's a process that requires a test. One, did something important happen in this building or in this block? I would submit that no, it didn't. Two, is the building the last one of its kind or a specimen of historical importance? And only if those two are met do you go to the third. And can the building be successfully repurposed for an economic use? The answer is no. It can't be. None of the buildings can be individually, and the building the entire block, as a block, can't be either. There's no economically viable use for these buildings or the block. They are functionally obsolete. As part of that conversation, it's important to note that this city has an amazing history of preserving buildings, but preserving districts, not just blocks, but districts. We have Bricktown, we have the Plaza District, we have Paseo, we have Midtown, we have Capitol Hill, we have districts everywhere. Not to mention, there is a district that's been preserved wonderfully right down the street from this, Film Row. And what makes a lot of these districts work is you have a unique set of buildings that still function, a lot of which can still function for their intended purpose. We don't have that here. You can't save this block for a district. It's not a district. What this block is a random grouping of random buildings that at this point in time is functionally obsolete. Staff report suggests that there's a chance that maybe the block as a whole could be deemed eligible for the National Registry. I would disagree with that assessment. When you look at what is required to preserve a block on the National Registry, you have to have a couple things. You have to have age. It has to be over 50 years old. Certainly we would meet that. You have to have significance. That's probably debatable. I would argue we don't. But then you have to have integrity. And let me tell you what integrity means. It requires a majority of the buildings to have the original facade and not have been significantly altered since the period of significance. We don't have that element. When we look at the buildings, Hotel Black, Carpenter Square, the Wren Hotel, 416 West Main, 412 West Main, 401 West Main, all of those buildings have had significant exterior facade modifications. In some instances, the entire front facade has been removed. So you can't meet that element. When we look to the building that was west of the lunchbox, it's gone in its entirety. It was demolished. So there's no way you can meet the third test. So we do not agree that this block could be considered for the National Registry as it sits today. In the past, this committee has been tasked with a very difficult decision. You've been tasked with asking to demolish buildings with no real plan. And today is a very different conversation. We're asking you to remove 9 buildings, but we're asking you to remove the 9 buildings, and we're showing you the incredible opportunity you have. It's not a what if or it could look like this. You're seeing what it is, and it's incredible. And it's incredible that this developer is willing to do that, because it's at a significant cost. What's really at stake here is the vibrancy of downtown, the continued growth of downtown, but also the retention of existing businesses and jobs. And I think it's worth noting that the staff has in their possession a support petition with over 2,600 names. We're not going to hand out individual copies. But we have a support petition of over 2,600 individuals that signed that on their own, that signed it because they want progress. They want a special place on this block. Those names represent 50 companies. They represent multiple individuals, all of which are here in Oklahoma City. The city does a phenomenal job of preserving buildings and blocks when it can and when it's necessary. It's not necessary here. What's necessary is the continuation of the opportunity and the momentum that downtown Oklahoma City has. I'm going to end with a quote from the Oklahoma Department of Commerce, because I think it's something that is perfectly fitting for this application. Job creation is the lifeblood of economic growth and prosperity for any community, large or small. Job creation generally comes from 2 primary sources: helping existing businesses to expand and attracting new businesses to the community. Helping existing businesses retain their current workforce and adding new jobs through expansion is by far the best and least expensive way to increase the number of jobs in the community. That's what we're asking you for today. In your staff report, under the recommendation, they have a series of recommendations that you are asked to make to various bodies. As I mentioned, the staff does recommend approval of everything in the application except for the bus station, and I've addressed that. So with that, we're here to answer any questions. We appreciate your patience in listening to us, and we would ask you to continue momentum that downtown Oklahoma City has by granting approval of this application. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, David. We are going to go ahead and ask people that have signed up to speak to come forward. First speaker is Judy Hatfield.
Madam Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Judy Hatfield, and I live at 131 Dean A. McGee, affectionately known as Carnegie Center, the old downtown library. As most of you know, I had the opportunity to redevelop the library as a mixed-use property with residential, commercial, and parking applications. I was able to also take advantage of both state and federal historic tax credits to make the project financially viable. Today, not only am I speaking for myself as a downtown resident and businesswoman, but I'm also speaking on behalf of the Greater Oklahoma City Chamber. I want to let you know that the 499 Sheridan project that's currently under review is very important to the continued dynamic growth and development of our central city. I walk the area every morning, and I'm very aware of what is going on that spells progress for us. The business community remembers very well the condition of downtown less than 2 decades ago, and the momentum created must be continued. If not, businesses will be driven to the suburbs or worse, out of our state. Oklahoma City's strong economy has allowed for the revitalization of historic districts around the city, and I'm involved in several of them. We believe downtown needs clusters of dense employment to continue its resurgence. This investment will bring millions of dollars into our core and thousands of jobs. We are urging a resolution to the issue so that it is a win-win and not a win-lose proposition. Drawing lines in the sand is not how partnerships are formed and is not the culture that we've created in Oklahoma City. We are known for the Oklahoma standard, and Oklahoma City is the pinnacle. We urge you to not only point out issues, but also present reasonable, positive solutions, and I think we've seen some today. Downtown is not viable without quality jobs and investments. Believe me, I know. Employers investing in downtown have led to our renaissance. You've heard that word used several times today. And if we discourage that, the renaissance will end. This is not to imply that we are anti-historical preservation, quite to the contrary. We've been supportive of major projects like the Skirvin, Automobile Alley, Film Row, Bricktown, and my own project. We've walked the halls of the Capitol to keep historic tax credits in place for appropriate projects. I've found as a historic redeveloper that just because something is old doesn't necessarily mean it has a significant role in our history to be preserved at any cost. We have to pay attention to the economics. We have to weigh the pros and cons of the future of our city to determine what makes sense. Again, I encourage you to support the 499 Sheridan project. I have clients looking forward to it and wanting to be a part of it and bring their businesses downtown as a result. In a city with pride in its collaborative effort and spirit and sense of the future, we believe a win-win solution can be accomplished. Thank you for listening to my comments today.
Thank you very much. David Pettyjohn?
I have a presentation. Awesome. My name is David Pettyjohn. I am the Executive Director of Preservation Oklahoma. I first of all want to thank each of you for your commitment in serving on this committee and allowing me the opportunity to speak in opposition to the demolition of these 9 historic structures. Is there a... Oh, great, thank you. Before I begin my presentation, I would like to, thanks.
David?
Yes.
May I interrupt?
Of course you can.
A few of us are very cold. Is there any is there any way we can get, I've got my coat on and that's all I can add, so if we could get that warmed up in here.
That's right. Oh, no problem at all. Before I begin my presentation, I want to read just a section of a letter that was submitted by our board president, Barrett Williamson. He says, "Dear Committee, I am writing this to protest the demolition of the existing historic buildings associated with the 499 West Sheridan development. As a preservation advocate on a local, state, and national level, I feel that this proposal does nothing to promote the preservation of the last existing intact block on Oklahoma City's main street. As an architect, I am inherently pro-development, but think we should create an environment where both of our historic buildings and new development can coexist without sacrificing one for the other. There are economic reasons for keeping the existing bus station, Hotel Black, and auto hotel buildings. All were occupied and operating very recently, even up to a year ago. All are viable as redevelopment projects. The proposed development will essentially limit any future development of high-rise buildings on this block. If fully redeveloped, this block should have at least 3 times the density of what is proposed. This will not happen as the majority of the proposed development is for 5 to 6-story parking garages and only 1 high-rise building on the entire block. Is this the best we can demand or expect from the development team? Oklahoma City has clamored for new development for decades. Why would we settle for this? Parking garages should be developed for mid-block locations, not primary corners. They can be much taller and are in other major cities. In Tulsa, the Mid-Continent building cantilevers over an existing historic mid-rise building. Please require the development team to integrate the 3 aforementioned buildings into the design of this important block. There is room for all, and the city will be better off in the long run for this. It will create additional tax revenue and promote quality development in the future. It will create a more walkable area and add to the street energy in the area. There have been several ideas floated for redevelopment of certain properties online, most notably at OKC Talk. They do include the retention of the historic character of the area. They coexist. Please deny the demolition application for the proposed development. Oklahoma City deserves better. Respectfully, Barrett Williamson. I am here today to talk about preserving Oklahoma City's history. One of the things that Preservation Oklahoma did was create an online petition to allow individuals to express their opposition to the demolition of these structures. I actually just checked right before I came up here. We're up to about 620 signatures. Yes, not all of them from Oklahoma. However, the majority of them are. You will see several of these comments that they emphasize the importance of preserving our history and encouraging the adaptive reuse of these structures. Now, one of the things that I want to talk about is this, the guideline that specifically addresses the structures you will be looking at today. And it says, in order to preserve the legacy of our past, structures and sites within the downtown districts that are significant to the history of the nation, state, city, or districts should be rehabilitated so that as much of the original fabric as possible remains intact. Mr. Box is correct. It does say should. However, what I am here to discuss is truly how significant this block is to the history of Oklahoma City, and particularly its commercial history. So how is that determined? Well, in September of 2009, this was just 6 years ago, the City of Oklahoma City completed a downtown intensive level survey which provided for the identification and evaluation of historic properties for individual significance or as contributing properties to a historic district. They looked throughout this area. And the city hired what we call a preservation professional, a historic preservation architect, somebody who has the training and the ability to determine what constitutes a historic district. And this individual determined that the block that we are looking at now does have the ability to become a potentially historic district. Let me scroll down one more. As you see here, it clearly states that the block of early 20th century commercial buildings bounded by North Hudson, West Sheridan, North Walker, and West Main. This potential district comprises, and I emphasize this, a rare intact grouping of early to mid-century commercial resources in downtown Oklahoma City that meet National Register of Historic Places criteria and have associations with commercial development in Oklahoma City. You'll see that there are 2 photos that I have included. The photo at the top left is the Harbor Longmire building, which is now 420 West Main. The buildings to the left of there are considered in this proposal to be demolished. The other photo that I have included is looking due east from that area. It is a block that no longer exists. You can see the Hightower building there in the corner. There's the Mercantile building gone. That whole area no longer exists. And what you can see from that photo is that this part of Oklahoma City is essentially gone, except for this last remaining intact, and I like to emphasize the word rare grouping of buildings. You will also note that the survey also identified the Union Bus Station as individually eligible for the listing in the National Register of Historic Places. And according to the survey, this building retains excellent integrity from its original period of construction and continues to clearly convey its architectural associations with the occurrence of the modern movement styling in downtown Oklahoma City. I want to remind you, this was accomplished only 6 years ago. This is not a survey from over a decade or 15 years ago. I found this in the Daily Oklahoman, and I wanted to include it. This was a full-page advertisement taken out on March the 22nd, 1941, announcing the grand opening of the Union Bus Station, really highlighting its importance to downtown Oklahoma City. They had a radio broadcast that went on there, and all of these congratulations, and really what a great era it was for Oklahoma City. Now, one of the things that we talked about was kind of experts, historic preservation experts. Well, the Downtown Design Review Committee, you are very fortunate in the fact that the city of Oklahoma City has a group of those professionals at your disposal, and that is called the Historic Preservation Committee. They can go and they can solicit a non-binding recommendation, but a recommendation nonetheless, to determine the historic significance of these structures as well as this block, to guide you in the decision to determine the historic significance of this area. I also would like to point out that the Historic Preservation Commission, as part of their power, it is to comment and provide recommendations to the City Council, Planning Commission, other city boards, committees and commissions on actions of other governmental units, such as yours, with respect to the effect of such actions upon historic, architectural, and archaeological resources. That commission is there to assist you, but it's also one of the reasons why that commission was created, to provide guidance in situations such as this. Another part of the guidelines, I want to point out kind of the purpose and intent of this committee, and I've really highlighted 3 areas there for you. Promote the downtown area as a vital mixed-use area, create a network of pleasant, safe, and connected public spaces and pedestrian amenities in the downtown area, preserve and restore historic resources and circulation patterns of the downtown district. Whoa, there we go. There are cities all over that are addressing some of the issues that we are facing here today. And in 2014, the Preservation Green Lab, which is part of the National Trust for Historic Preservation, released a study called Older, Smaller, Better, measuring how the character of buildings and blocks influences urban vitalities. It determined that neighborhoods containing a mix of older, smaller buildings of different ages support greater levels of positive economic and social activity than areas dominated by newer, larger buildings. Here are some of the findings. As you can see here, it says older, mixed-use buildings are more walkable, nightlife is alive, the creative economy thrives in older, mixed-use neighborhoods. We see that happening in Oklahoma City today. When you look at the Paseo District, when you see the Plaza District, the area, and of course, obviously Film Row, outside of the Downtown Design District. But what's important to realize is that downtown Oklahoma City deserves the same, deserves an opportunity to highlight these historic structures, show their capability of architectural significance, as well as their ability to generate the creative economy that we see all throughout in other areas of Oklahoma City. Now, I'd like to end my presentation on this last image. This image was developed by a fellow at the Institute for Quality Communities at the University of Oklahoma. As you can see, it is an aerial photo of downtown Oklahoma City in 1953, a mere 62 years ago. The buildings highlighted in blue are structures with us today, and those in red are those being considered for demolition. This image is striking since it clearly demonstrates the vast number of structures that have been demolished in the past 6 decades. Just to clarify, it's not all of downtown. If you look up, you see California Sheridan, Main Street at the very top, and then Reno, and then right south. These demolitions that have taken place over the past 6 decades have removed irreplaceable markers of our storied past, and today you are being asked to demolish the last remaining intact block from this era. By approving it, you will completely remove any reminder of this part of our city's historic fabric. We respectfully request that you deny the application to demolish these historic buildings. As this photo so clearly indicates, we have demolished enough of our past already. Thank you.
Thank you. Our last request is Anthony Black.
Thank you. Madam Chair, committee members, I'm Tony Blatt, and I'm the chairperson of the Oklahoma City Foundation for Architecture. And I know I am last. I am still realize that you have given a lot of your time today, and you have been very patient. I am going to be extremely brief and just read this for the record. Dear DDRC committee members, I am writing today on behalf of the Oklahoma City Foundation for Architecture regarding the proposed 499 Sheridan development. The Oklahoma City Foundation for Architecture has concerns about the proposed development for reasons that include both preservation of historic structures and its site planning, which should activate pedestrian activity. We feel that efforts should be made to preserve the Union Bus Station, the Hotel Black, and the Motor Hotel, as they provide excellent opportunities for high-density adaptive reuse and already embody good urban design principles, including creating street edges, and stimulating at-grade street-facing activity. Along with our concern for the loss of these buildings and their associated Oklahoma City history, we feel that elements of the overall proposed development, including the Sky Bridge across Hudson Avenue and the lack of substantive retail, and the current approach to and siting of parking structures will remove the vitality of the surrounding streets and create an uninviting pedestrian environment. We believe that alternative considerations should be actively pursued in order to more strongly promote design principles that will encourage foot traffic along the block. The Oklahoma City Foundation for Architecture feels that preservation of our community's history while planning to encourage surrounding pedestrian activity is important, and the proposed development makes little effort to incorporate these aspects in the current design. It is our hope that the Downtown Design Review Committee will consider denial of the demolition application unless significant changes are made to the proposal that address the preservation of the historic structures and a greater significance assigned for street-level pedestrian activity. And if there are any questions or comments, please feel free to call either myself or Melissa Hunt, the Executive Director. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there anyone else from the community that would like to speak one way or the other about this project?
My name is Allison Bailey. I live at 216 Northwest 20th Street. I am 30 years old. I am a millennial. I've purchased homes in Oklahoma City, and I have started my business in Oklahoma City. I am a part of a group of young citizens who are planting roots in central urban Oklahoma City. When I have visitors and I get the chance to show them my city, I am proud. The places that I usually take them are usually my favorite places: Automobile Alley, the Plaza District, Midtown, Kitchen 324 in the Braniff Building. I think it's no coincidence, and there's been numerous articles and pieces of research on this, that these places that I love have ties to previous eras, especially here in Oklahoma City. When we have millions of visitors in our new convention center, I want them to see a snapshot of where our city has been and where it's going. I want them to see the Devon Tower next to historic buildings with streetfront activity. I want visitors to enjoy the types of places that I go when I visit cities. I want them to spend money in Oklahoma City. We all cringe when we think of the character and the history that we lost during the urban renewal era of the 60s and 70s. And yet we're still having this conversation. With acres of downtown grass available, we are debating tearing more historic structures down for office buildings and parking garages. I don't want another project in downtown that is going to contribute to lifeless evenings and weekends. I've only had the chance to be an active citizen for the last decade, and I'm already exhausted with this conversation. I think that demanding changes to this project will improve the project, and it will also improve this part of downtown. I hope that it will encourage developers to not take this same path when they are continuing the momentum for our city. I hope that the Downtown Design Review will echo my thoughts on this and not approve the demolition plans until a significant portion of these buildings are saved. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. Lisa? Yep.
Yes, I did want to mention that Jeffrey Parks, who is the president of the current president of AIA Central Oklahoma, was here. He had to leave because there was luncheon today, but the AIA sent a letter that was included in your packet that both advocated for some preservation, but more importantly, for mixed-use urban design concepts and trying to minimize the parking as much as possible. So since he didn't get to speak, I wanted to point that out. I don't think I have anything to add to the information that you've heard and the information presented in the staff report. I did want to just point out the only demolition that we recommended denying was the bus station. I thought one of the previous speakers made a good point about allowing for a variety of architectural styles and distinctiveness. And to me, some of these existing buildings are part of that same thought process. So in the staff recommendation, we have recommended one denial. We have item number 2 is to approve big chunks of the proposed project. And then item number 3 is a lot of the approvals would require conditions. Either we saw some design items we thought could be conditioned, or they would require some variances and other approvals that would need to be conditioned.
Okay. Thank you, Lisa. I'd like to know if any of the committee members have any comments or questions for any of the speakers that have come before us.
I have a question. Do we know what the progress is on the traffic study that's alluded to in paragraph 6, item 6 on your staff report?
Yeah, I keep being told it's any day. Paul, does anybody or Mary, do you guys have more information?
I do not.
Okay.
So when we get the traffic study, I mean, what's that going to tell us relative to these parking garages? I mean, it may tell us different entrances or exits, or how could that study impact what we're looking at today?
It's some background for anybody who doesn't know. So the 499 team has engaged a traffic study. It's not a parking study, it's a traffic study. And the OG&E team has engaged a traffic study. They're being done by the same consultant. And they, as far as I understand, they are working together to make sure that they're using the same data and that they're both considering each other's project, and that they are arriving at the same conclusion. So they're not issuing reports with just completely different conclusions. Again, that's a traffic study, so it's going to inform what city public works and traffic need to, what, if anything, city streets need to react to in terms of lanes, signaling, other traffic devices. I would expect also that it would inform something of the entrances and exits. And we've had that conversation with both design teams, and they seemed, one thought process was given that they had already coordinated their parking garages with their parking consultant, they didn't anticipate that to be a change to be made for that. But that if a change is recommended, they would obviously react to it.
Yeah, and I can read, we've reached out to our traffic engineer, and I'll just read into the record what he said. I don't have the final analysis completed with all of the other 5 new developments yet. However, based on our discussions, I would anticipate that Walker will be converted from 2-lane facility to a 4-lane facility. The access to your garage across from the Sheridan Walker garage is expected to have full access entering from both north and south, but probably restricted access exiting for right turns only. This is similar to how the Sheridan Walker garage is currently controlled. Even with the expansion of Walker from 2 lanes to 4 lanes, the level of service of the access to the garage is expected to be, poor during the day. The anticipated growth includes over 1.5 million square feet of office. During the PM hours, specifically for approximately 30 to 45 minutes, operations will be poor until all of the garages in the vicinity will empty. However, this provides some of the information you're looking for. So I think it's important when we look at the issue of the garage and what the traffic study is going to tell us. The issue was raised about the school. And, my comment on that is it's downtown. I mean, we put a school downtown. They knew what being downtown means. It's a place of commerce. It's a place where cars are. They also located right across the street from an existing parking garage. So I can't imagine that this is some sort of negative impact. It's downtown. This is part of what a downtown school encounters. It's not unique here, anywhere in the country. You have downtown, you have traffic, and you have people. And so putting a school there, it's a great opportunity, but I'm guessing the folks over at the school understood that, and they probably have protocols in place to help students understand what it means to be downtown.
Okay. Any other questions or comments?
I do have questions and comments. And of course, I tend to look at the site design more than anything else. And so the landscape plan was changed significantly since the last time, so that made me look at it even closer. So I'm disappointed that you have added the retail. You've added it on the north and the south, and that's great. But there is no retail to speak of on the west or the east. And even though your building frontage faces the east, there is no connection between that building and the plaza. So even though we have this great plaza, a place to eat, a place to drink, there's nothing to eat and there's nothing to drink. There's nothing to do, there's no stage, there's no entertainment, there's no art, there's no fountain. So people who say why nobody ever goes outside in Oklahoma, it's because there's not opportunities for them to do things when they go outside. And that concerns me.
You want to come to the, to the mic, please?
Street-level plan, we may not have communicated our intent clearly. I would agree. And actually, there is meaningful retail. I alluded to the carts earlier, and that's a subcomponent of it, but let's go ahead and go to the street level. Well, the success of any outdoor space, as you know, is related to the activities adjacent to it. And so we have identified a significant space. I don't recall the precise, I'm going to say it's 2,600 square feet, that is immediately adjacent to that space. It has access. It is the key spot. I will tell you, within our team, as you know, you heard it all day, there's a sub-theme, can retail be successful? Of all the spots on the 499 development, this is the most desirable spot. This is the spot that is believed to be successful. And go ahead and circle the zone I'm talking about, Russ, right there. What's critical about that is we don't ultimately know how the building will fully be used and how people will flow. We suspect many people will go across the crosswalk and back into Devon Energy. They'll also come down the escalators right there, and we have access into that retail from in the lobby as well as outside. We actually think that's going to be one of the most successful components. And the intention is that that would flow out and engage the plaza as well as, in nice weather, have the carts. We have high tops we talked about in December that would line the glass wall along there. It's our vision is to make the whole, both exterior as well as interior, come to life. Now, in addition to that, we also have the retail on the southeast corner, which, we believe, we don't know exactly how that's going to be leased at the moment, but we are using every bit of space we can for retail. And I didn't say it earlier today, but I think when we met with you in December, we had something a little over 8,000 square feet of retail. We now have 15,000 square feet of active use spaces. Don't know how it's all going to play out. I may be a bit naive about my restaurant across from the school, but on that particular component, I think my client is convinced it will be successful, and it will bring vitality, and we're committed to doing that.
Can I ask another question about that same retail? Yeah, on your elevations you show either, it looks like frosted glass.
Yeah, it's a bad rendering. It's glass.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it'll be...
Yeah, it's transparent. Okay. Yeah, thank you. Apologize for our renderings.
You've got great renderings. It's not really an issue. Go ahead.
I just think that you talk about the design going inside, outside, but there is no people going inside and outside. It is literally, there's no pedestrian access to your building from the plaza directly. You have to go around.
No, there is. There are 4 doors into the retail, and Russ, there's a pair of doors from the outside. It's hard to read. Well, no, go back to the north retail. There's a pair of doors right there, and that whole surface is glass, so you're seeing into the cafe, Starbucks, whatever. There's also a pair of doors inside the lobby from that retail, and we're hoping that there'll be synergies, both that retail into the lobby as well as in appropriate weather into the garden. And that's why, although it's a nuance, it's not such a nuance. We've been internally pushing within the design team that we would find a way to balance out how you bring carts out there. So we're trying to do everything we can to bring that activity out. It's happening now at Devon, and it's been successful. And what we're trying to do is ramp that up. It's the vision. I mean, honestly, we've all been around this. That garden is not intended to be the 1960s heroic. It's intended to be a place that people use and enjoy and comes to life. And so that retail is important, and I share your concern. But we've got also the major entrance in the lobby. Frankly, the one that's probably going to be used as much or more than the one in the south is the north entrance. And so we think, and you have the crosswalk. So you've got hundreds of people a day probably crossing there because we think they're going to take the shortest path into Devon. As much as we'd like to say we'd load the corner, I'm not sure the corner of Sheridan and Hudson will be as frequently used, at least by the employees of Devon, as that crosswalk there. Can I tell you it's going to be fabulous? I hope it is. That's our intent. Yeah, that's our intent.
Okay. Anybody else with questions or comments?
I don't want to go on and on about the landscape.
Oh, okay, keep going.
Civil cells, structural soils, are you doing that in the plaza, or are you just? Okay.
Okay, that was a different language that was...
Yes, that's...
They can only speak that language with each other. Okay.
I have a question, just for the sake of clarity. Yep. You really sold me on the screen on the garage. Did I understand that's not going to be on Walker?
It's not. It turns the corner, so you've got the glass beacon, turns the corner for a portion of the module, and then Walker is treated as a very nice parking garage. I mean, there's nothing to be embarrassed about. But to be blunt, this is in the spirit of this is a project that has to balance lots of goals. And we've got parking issues, we've got the beacon, and so the quality of that garage is going to be terrific. Is it as fancy as the garage on Sheridan? No. But I would argue it really doesn't need to be.
Okay, could I ask you to pull up just an straight-on elevation of that garage? Because that's, I think, the important point there.
Just the Walker elevation?
Just the Walker elevation, yeah.
So what you're going to see, starting on the far right, is the glass beacon, and with the bus station sign. Then that kind of dense zone you see there is all the GFRC. Then there's a solid panel of articulated precast, which parenthetically, when we do a Class A commercial project, any city in the world, it looks exactly like that parking garage. And I could rattle off whether it's a Class A development or it's a corporate headquarters for Wachovia Bank. So what you have to appreciate is, so everything to the left of that is precast. That is a quality material. That's what we would typically do. What might be missed a little bit is we have taken the step to go beyond. I will tell you, the density, the beauty, and the cost of the enclosures and the parking on Sheridan, on Hudson, and on Main are exceptional. It's beautiful. And so, but we don't have it on Walker.
The issue that we've got, though, on Walker is there's already a parking garage that looks very much like that, and it's not attractive. People walk to the other side of the street because it's scary, and we're creating on Walker, which is a beautiful street. 180 has done a great job on that street. We're creating an alley type of situation where people really won't want to go. And in addition, we've got cars coming out on that.
Right.
Your recommendation from your parking consultant is to turn that 2-lane bicycle lane and on-street parking street into a 4-lane. We already have kind of a traffic situation with the grade school. There's a backup with the carpool lane, and evidently they have figured out a method of kind of holding people off of not parking on the on-street parking and using that as their carpool lane. All of a sudden, with the various new garages on here, you'd have 4 lanes, people trying to get home from work. When, really, you've got Sheridan, which is 4 lanes. You've got Hudson, which is 4 lanes. There are other ways to get out of town if you really want to get out of town, and hopefully people would really prefer to be close. Right. I've visited with some transportation experts, and they've said the best way to get people in and out of a garage is to have them do a right turn out and turn from the lane that services that garage into and take a right turn in. And if we turn this into a 4-lane, people are going to be trying to go left. I'm very concerned about that.
I am not qualified to speak to a recommendation that has not officially been made, so I'm not going there. I defer to once we know what we're dealing with, except that we will do the best we can to manage it. The reason for Walker is at the strategic level, what we heard is Walker was the best way, the most appropriate way to feed the system. It's the same reason that I believe our colleagues at OG&E are doing it. And I can assure you, once the final recommendation is made, we'll do everything we can. To be frank, the streets that are important in our mind, and I believe in your mind, is Main, Hudson, and Sheridan. Walker is important, but we can't do everything. So we could pretend to put active use on Walker. Does anybody in that panel think it's going to ever be retail? Probably not Walker. So, at some point in time, we have to find a way to build a building to meet the needs we have and to allow the city to grow. And I would argue at 15,000 square feet of active use in places that have a chance of being successful, that's a win. Walker? So what we'll do, as we would in any Class A commercial development, we'll do the absolute best we can. The enclosure will be handsome. It will be carefully detailed at the level that you have come to expect from us and from our client. The landscape will be a quality, but it is what it is. And I'm being straightforward. Yeah.
Let me address one point. surely this body's not suggesting that we impose some sort of moratorium on development to study traffic patterns. What we commit to is we have hired the experts in the field, and when that study comes in, we will sit down, we will work with staff, we will find the solution that works best for downtown, for everybody. But deciding traffic patterns, I don't think is really what's before the body today. But we have people, and we're going to sit down and work that out with staff.
I have a couple of comments. A couple of things I really like about the project. The north garage actually kind of, in my mind, and preservationists probably would not be very happy about me saying this, but it kind of replicates some of the same scale that is currently on Main and Hudson. And I like it. I think that we would be served a lot better if the entrance and exit off of Hudson would be moved down. I know that there's been some discussion about that, so that you could actually get a little bit more retail and depth. I'm not sure, and this might be, if Mr. Befford is still here, a question. A 23-foot deep from outside face of the building to the inside, or to the outside face of the interior wall of retail, is that really going to be able to, not really, to really be able to be used as an active use type of space? Mark, could you address that?
We're talking about the retail frontage on Main Street. Yes. I think the 23 to 25 feet depth is perfect for what you're going to see in that area, absolutely.
So what do you think would be appropriate uses, people that actually would want to use that space?
That's a tough question, because what ultimately we're ready for today and what ultimately would be used in that is that's for a different discussion. I'm just not prepared to talk about that right now.
Okay. But
that bay depth is actually good for that size of an area that you're working with, absolutely.
Okay. Great, thank you.
If I may, for the committee's benefit, that size is the same size as the Tina Hicks store.
The what store?
The Tina Hicks store in Oklahoma Tower.
Okay.
So it's the same size.
Okay, good, thank you. Okay, another issue that I've got with the site, and you may have, the site planning may actually have something in mind for this, but it's the triangular plaza on the second, I think it's on the second floor, between the parking garage and the tower. Yeah, that's you. Is there any, like, program type of space for that?
It's a roof terrace. Our client is still having conversations about what will happen there, but it's not public. It's literally above the loading dock. And so basically, when you're in the fitness facility and you're looking out, that's what you're looking at. And we know at a minimum it's nice precast pavers, but it's not a public space whatsoever.
Okay.
Yeah.
So is it just to maintain that distance from the parking garage?
Yeah, it is.
Windows on the...
We use that as a way to get a long span to get the trucks below it, put a roof above it to protect the trucks from the weather. There's a rolling door, and it's literally like a little infill between the office tower and then the parking garage.
Okay.
Yep.
Any other questions?
As we mentioned before, and I think the concern still exists, it's just the circulation around the area, because it is a lot of parking. I admit, and we acknowledge that it's needed. It's just concerning that there's a break there in the use from just having, you have added active use, and I think that's great. So thank you very much for adding some other active use. I think whether it's office or retail or service is not very material, certainly to my decision-making. I think that's, I think just having that there seems adequate to me. I'm really concerned about the traffic and just the fact that we're changing the nature of Walker by this one decision, really, in a huge way, in a very material way, knowing that we're going to have more parking down the street on Walker. Just a comment. It's worrisome to me that we are changing it from previously a street that has a bike lane and is a big bike venue. So where is that going to go? I think we just really need to look at the big picture to keep our circulation patterns very positive, in that area. Does anyone else have comment on that?
Well, I would just like to make a few comments. First of all, this is a strange process in the fact that this committee never gets to interact with the applicant to any measured degree except up here, which sometimes is a slightly strained process. But I can tell you I'm very excited about this project. I think you've done a beautiful job. I think some of the concerns we've voiced I would agree with. I think my biggest concern is the traffic circulation and what that does. I think that, as we look forward as a city, that we're going to run out of land for big parking garages and to create the density we need, and I think it really emphasizes the fact that we need to pay closer attention to a mass transit system. But having said that, this is the project here, and I think the question of the day that is before us is, do we tear these buildings down? And John, I was kind of skeptical about the bus station, but you're a great salesman, and I knew that you had exceptional talents, and I think that you've done a really great job of making that corner special and remembering that bus station. So I agree with the arguments that I'm a preservationist. I think, Dick and I have both renovated a lot of older buildings. I think that our community has paid attention to Midtown, Bricktown, Automobile Alley. We've really tried to preserve those buildings that could be preserved and turned into something that makes economic sense. I'm not sure these do, and so I'm inclined to agree with the demolition of the buildings and basically the overall plan. One of the ironies of this deal, I think, is the Sky Bridge, frankly. We've spent, led by Devin, over $100 million to create downtown walkable, interactive spaces, and we're talking about putting the Sky Bridge in. Now, having run across Hudson a million times myself and ducking traffic, I can see it, but I just think there's some irony there, and if possible, maybe rethink that a little bit and see if we could make that pedestrian crossing at grade. But I'm not going to hold it up because of that. So basically, those are my comments. It'd be great to have more retail on all the streets. I think it is somewhat disconcerting to have more or less a dead street on Hudson, on Walker, which I think is what's going to happen there. But there's enough activity going on in and around it, I think it's going to be fine. Those are my comments.
Thank you.
Just a quick comment on the demolition. The project is phenomenal. All the traffic will get worked out as it generally does in these situations. One comment on the bus terminal. When I redeveloped what is now the Montgomery, we had a lot of issues with the bus terminal and their clientele. So I approached Global Greyhound in Dallas, and I went to see them to take, buy the building or whatever. And we worked on it a little bit before Nick was brave enough to take it on. It's a disaster. They themselves said, we got to get out of there. We don't pass code. We're grandfathered in. So I don't go along with staff
when we get to the motion, we need to include the Greyhound bus station to take it down as well. It's in awful condition. It was a single-purpose building that is no longer used as a single purpose. The project is going to be outstanding. The retail will fill in when you got those kind of numbers vertically. As the redeveloper of historic properties, the combination of the Carnegie and I might as well plug the Park Harvey, and we've renovated it to, get in tune with what's going on downtown with the canopy and the repainting. It's all part of the old and the new, the OG&E Art Deco, this incredible Picard concept that's going to complement the Devon. It's just really exciting. The traffic, hey, we used to complain that there was no traffic. I like traffic. Let's go for traffic. So when you're ready for the motion, let's include the Greyhound bus terminal.
Well, one of the issues I've got with including the Greyhound bus terminal, in addition to the fact that it is a really great example of that particular type of architecture, is I'm not completely satisfied with what would take its place. And and I've expressed that already. So I don't know if we should take them one at a time or if we can group them. Okay.
Can I just say something real quick? Staff didn't see the proposal to keep this bus station sign until this meeting. So whatever you're approving, let's make sure it's either what you saw or what you want to see back or what was given to you in your packet.
Okay.
Just to be clear.
And I do like the bus station sign. I think that was a far better idea, but I'm just not satisfied with especially the Walker side of the garage.
Is there any interest on your part or thought to using the facade of the bus station to incorporate in any kind of design on that corner?
No. You will not be surprised. We have looked at it and every which way. It makes no sense. I wish I had another answer, but I don't.
Well, I want to say I like the project. I think it's a beautiful project. I understand the need for the tower and certainly the parking that accompanies it. And I appreciate it. I'm not negative about the project, but you're asking us to consider a lot, and it's our responsibility to do so. So, thank you.
Sorry. So, okay, I'll go back to my beginning of my notes, which were, I like the building. I like the way the building angles. I think it's an incredible opportunity there, and I think you could do better with that. But that is not that important. The things I don't like are the overhead walkways. I don't like tearing down so many buildings just for parking, and I just wonder, and maybe Lisa can tell us, how long does it take to get HP or a historic committee to look at those buildings and make us feel better about tearing them down?
It would take, I'm looking at Katie, at least a month from today to get it to them and to get it back to you. I think we could have it, we couldn't have it for February, I don't think. February 4th? Okay. Do we have, when does your agenda go out, though? I'm sorry? About a week before that. So a week from now? Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so we could, okay, yeah, we could get it on the agenda for their February 4th, and we could report back to you at February, but we wouldn't be able to get their findings into your packet, but we could send it by email.
And so that may be a consideration. You know, I'm just about the opposite of what you guys are thinking. I think the west parking garage and the main tower makes sense to me. They fit together. It's when you cross the street and you end up with the two sky bridges and you end up with a little bitty tiny parking garage. I like diversity, and what I see now is just a whole lot of things that look the same. And those are the buildings I would like to save, or at least allow a different type of design.
And I was just going to add that I think you guys did a great job on your design, definitely. And I understand the economics of everything. It's very difficult for us when it comes to preserving these projects. And this is a very large block, as someone illustrated very well with the photo of the buildings that have been torn down in Oklahoma City in that small area. This would be pretty substantial, and I think that's why you hear us trying to give you so much feedback on trying to preserve at least a piece of that. Now, I want to also echo the same sentiments as Betsy, that west side, the Walker side of the garage. I do think that there's an opportunity there that you guys could take further advantage of, and it's Connie also on those sky bridges. I think that's something we also mentioned to you guys about trying to do more to activate that street. And I do appreciate what you guys have done as far as trying to honor some of the historic elements on a lot of those buildings. I think that was great. But I think that there is something more that we would like to see, especially with trying to preserve at least some part of this block.
Okay, what do we do with all of this?
Well, if I could real quick, on the issue of sending it to the HP Commission, there is nothing that they would be able to tell you that we haven't told you today. We told you about each and every building. Your professional planning staff has reviewed each and every building. They recommend to tear down each and every building but the bus station. We think we've satisfied the burden as to why the bus station could come down. As it relates to the building, the Carpenter Square, I think it's important that you hear again what the study said. The building as a whole would be deemed hazardous and unsuitable for human occupancy. This isn't us saying it, this is an independent study. So there's nothing that the HP Commission could give you that wasn't provided to you today and hasn't been provided to your staff.
Okay.
Just one more comment on the walkways. Let's not forget our weather, and let's not forget you're talking about traffic and back and forth and Devon and who the occupant is and the reason why. I'm all for the walkways. I use them. We all use them. I'm at leadership. I go over to 210 Park. If the weather's nice, I walk out on the street. But our weather isn't always nice.
Dick, I agree with you. I didn't say it was a deal killer for me. I just said, let's think about it. I've been in every one of those buildings, and I've had the unfortunate experience to parked in that parking garage. And so taking them one by one, I think my first memory of Carpenter Square was when I was Byron Gambulus and we went down there when he owned it and the guy pulled a gun on us. And I just don't think there's any, it's not a functionally viable development. I think it's in horrible condition, and economically, I'm not sure. It's sat there for at least 40 years, I think, with no occupant other than I think they did some occasional plays there. The parking situation, I can personally tell you, I've skinned the tires and rims off my car parking there. I'm going to send somebody a bill for that, Nick, I think. I just don't see how in the world you could convert that to anything. The Black Hotel, I think, has been stripped of any historic significance, kind of like the Indian Temple when we looked at that, where they'd punched so many holes in it and ripped. They've pretty much destroyed, in my mind, any historic significance. The bus station, I think you could argue, but, here again, I think that we're splitting hairs here. I think John's done a great job of trying to preserve some memory of that and perhaps create a more leasable space, frankly, than what's there. So as far as keeping the buildings, I just don't see how it can be done and make this development go forward, which I think is going to have a huge impact on downtown and this city. So I'm okay with that. Some of the small issues we've talked about, screening maybe the Walker side, I'd like to talk about that. But I'm okay with making a motion here.
Okay, Mr. Nichols.
I really popped up to speak, Madam Chairman, about the Skyway, the
Yeah.
concourse. I'm very proud of your comments you made about Project 180, since that's entirely funded, 100% funded by the Devon TIF, which we created in such a way that none of the money would be spent on our project, but it would all be spent in fixing up the streets and parks in downtown, and I'm proud of that.
And we thank you for that.
At the same time, as you said, Mr. Tannenbaum, we do have bad weather. And as an employer, we saw this when we were in 6 different silos around town. There's human nature. And if it's raining outside and you have to go to a meeting, or you should go talk to one of your colleagues across the street, and it's raining or cold or inclement, as beautiful as we've tried to make the streets and parkways, you put it off. You don't do it. You don't have the communications among a company that you would like to have. Try as we might to make those streets and parkways nice, and they are used on nice days, but we do have bad days. And so for us to have part of our employees across the street without a connector is a serious detriment and would have a very major impact on our commitment to use this property as one of the major tenants. So I understand the arguments against that, but that's just human nature, and we have to accommodate that, and we have to accommodate the adverse weather that we have. And I agree also, Mr. Hainsworth, with your comments. A lot of the comments on preservation are really fantasies about which we wish was still there, but it's not there. No one's going to come downtown and show their out-of-town guest the Greyhound bus station. I mean, let's be real. Hopefully they'll come by and see the Christmas decorations that Devon has, but no one's going to go show them the Greyhound bus station. Thanks.
Thank you.
2 last points, and I'll sit down. The discussion about keeping the bus station because you don't like the use, what happens is if we don't have the parking where the bus station is, we're once again further in the problem that every other developer has done up until now. We don't have adequate parking to support this development. And the last point I'll make, and we fully recognize that it's hard when we're talking about tearing down buildings, but the image you were shown, it has all these blocks that have been demolished. But the point of this picture to me is, when you look at this block of old buildings that's no longer here, this is the Devon Energy Center. Would you trade this for the Devon Energy Center? Of course not. Would you trade this block for the Myriad Gardens? Of course not. So sometimes progress in great developments require old, abandoned blocks to be removed for something bigger, better, that furthers what downtown is.
Okay, thank you.
I agree about the historic buildings, or buildings that are deemed historic on this site. They've already been degraded to the point where they don't have very much historical integrity at all. And so I do not have a problem with the demolition. I think we're now at the point where we're just piecemealing this. I think it's nice that you've tried to retain some elements of some of the historic buildings. I would like to see the bus station in some manner utilized on that corner in some adaptive reuse, or even the facade of it. But I think now we're just starting to split hairs, as Chuck said, and it is seeming to me now more like an all or nothing proposal. I'd really like comments from my fellow.
I'm ready to make a motion,
He's ready to make the motion.
Okay.
unless there's other comments from my wonderful commissioners.
I do have a question for the developer. Could you come forward? I've got a question for you. And my question is, I know this is expensive, I know this is money and it's not mine, but one of the things that I really like about the previous the previous presentation was the possibility, and that, they are going to put a residential tower on their corner. And could you ever structure your parking garage there on the corner of Walker and Sheridan to potentially hold another tower on top of it and create the possibility in the future? I think one of the things I have a huge problem with is the fact that we will be living with, and far beyond when I'm alive and my children are alive and my grandchildren will be faced with a corner with two pretty significant parking garages and very little retail. And I understand, I mean, I get it. I understand all of the economics behind that. But it would be great if we could get some kind of structure that could ensure that we could have future building in the future, but instead of just having a parking garage there.
Well, there's two questions to that, or sorry, there's at least two answers to that one question. One is a structural. Can you build a garage, a parking garage of that level, and put in structural systems, foundations, and supports that would ultimately allow you to put in a residential, if that's what you're asking, a residential building on top of that? The answer from a structural standpoint is absolutely. You could do that. It's done all the time. The two challenging parts to that question is that doesn't come without a cost, obviously. And the challenge for a developer and a financier is that you're sinking that cost in today with no return on that cost, because you don't know if you will ever build that apartment building or condo. That's really a function of the marketplace. And so I think the challenge that we would have would, yes, we could do it on a structural basis, but I would be investing capital, and I would have no return on that capital, and I couldn't tell an investment partner that in 5 years or 10 years or 15 years or 20 years that we would ever build residential there. That would not be my first choice as to where, I'm not a resi expert, but that would not be the first choice or location that I'd want to put a residential. I'd want to be over, actually where I don't know who's left from the OG&E crowd, but I'd rather be facing the park. So in my mind, as an image, I like the idea, I like the activation, I like the density. I don't have the financial wherewithal to commit those funds because I don't know what it's so.
You don't know what it would.
I don't know what it would be, and it would it would be great to say in 5 years we'll build a tower there, but I don't know if there's any market for a tower there. So I'm sympathetic to what you're saying, but I don't have, the temerity or the money to say, let's put this in and hope that in a couple of years we can figure out how to do resi there. So.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah.
Would you be willing to screen the parking on the west side as you have done on Main and Sheridan in some manner, and not just leave that open? I mean, it'll look exactly like the parking garage that's already across the street, and it's just.
I just want to make sure I understand the question. Are you on
screen the parking
on Walker?
Similar, yes. Screen the parking in the same design that you have proposed for Sheridan, along Sheridan and along Main Street, and not just leaving it open.
I mean, I think that's something we would commit to study.
Okay.
I don't know how. I mean, there's other constituencies that are, it's not solely my decision. I mean, there's architectural considerations, and we'd certainly want to talk to. But I think it's something that we would. We've heard your comments about the issue. I mean, Betsy, your comments, or I should say, Madam Chairwoman, your comments relative to the concerns you have about Walker.
Okay.
Okay. My colleagues have suggested that that's an excellent idea. But I think they would like that to be sort of a final resting place, that is what we would compel us or compel you to go forward with the project.
Thank you.
Sure.
Do we have a motion? Now, we should take, okay.
I move to approve...
Wait.
Oh.
Dick, sorry.
Go ahead.
We need to go by the staff recommendations.
That's where I'm at.
Possible?
Order.
Yeah, okay. I move to approve case items 1A, 1C, 1D, 1E, 1F, 1G, 1H, and 1J to demolish existing buildings including the Union Station, 401 West Sheridan, 1 North Hudson, the Black Hotel, 17 North Hudson American Motor Hotel, 400, 404, and 406 West Main Carpenter Square Theater, 408 West Main Street, 412 West Main Street, and 416 West Main Street. Item 3D, I approve to construct overhead pedestrian walkways.
Dick, let's vote on each individual.
We are going to vote on the first item that I move to approve, the demolition of the 9 facilities.
All the buildings.
That's correct.
But could it be on the condition that they do that corner that John showed us?
We're not there yet.
Oh.
Well, but with the, what he's saying...
With the same facade on the west, on Walker parking garage facade would be the same as the Sheridan facade. Finish.
Okay. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay. Tannenbaum, Ainsworth. And just for clarity, I have a problem with just wholesale demolition without really considering each thing. So, with that said, can we vote on Dick's motion for demolishing 9 buildings? Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. And I would say nay. And okay, so it's 3-3. Okay. We're suggesting that we take these individually. You want to do a motion for those?
I move to approve the demolition of 427 West Sheridan, the Union Bus Station.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Nay. Nay? Aye. Okay, so that has passed.
I move to approve the demolition of 401 West Sheridan.
Second.
Okay, that's going to, is it going to be an Ainsworth Tannenbaum thing?
Yeah.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
I move to approve the demolition of 1 North Hudson Black Hotel.
All in favor?
I need a second.
Oh, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
We skipped one.
I move to approve the demolition of 17 North Hudson, the American Motor Hotel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
I move to approve the demolition of 400, 404, 406 West Main Carpenter Square Theater.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
I feel like we should have an amen after this, man. I move to approve 408 West Main Street.
Second. That was a Faulkner second, by the way. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
I move to approve the demolition of 412 West Main Street and 416 West Main Street.
Second.
That was Ainsworth. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
Madam Chairman, did we skip item C, 401 West Sheridan, in our vote?
Paula, do you know?
Oh, second, okay.
I think I got them all, didn't I?
Did you do the last one, 416?
Yeah, I combined those, yeah.
Okay, now, that kind of opens us up for more. We have, do we have any motions on the additional cases, and those would be items 3, is that right? Okay, so the additional cases include construct the overhead pedestrian walkways, construct the service and loading areas with mid-block alley, construct a vine-covered green wall that separates the new parking garage from the city building, construct the sidewalks, landscaping and site improvements, and screening and fencing. That all can be taken as one.
I move to approve those items.
Second.
Okay. That was a Tannenbaum Ainsworth motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So we already discussed staff recommendation number 3. Oh, with the exception, okay, with number 3, 1B,
And no one's really talked about that one. I love the lunchbox sign. I'd like to see it stay somewhere on that block.
oh, okay. Is that a possibility?
Yes, we agree with the condition.
I move to approve item 1B, demolish existing buildings at 411 and 413 West Sheridan, the lunchbox, with the condition that has now been accepted by the applicant to refurbish and reinstall a lunchbox sign in approximately the existing location. Más o menos.
Is that okay to
Chuck.
do it that way? Okay.
Second.
Okay, Tannenbaum, Ainsworth, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay,
All right, Chuck, your turn.
he's getting tired.
2. You're on 2, next page.
I make a motion that we approve the site with conditions the applicant receive approval for those closing to vacate the 20-foot alley and reserve an easement to close and vacate the right of way on Sheridan Avenue.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Okay, I make a motion they construct a new office tower on the east side of the property with the condition that the applicant receives a variance from the Board of Adjustment from the building setback and minimum building height regulations.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Come on, Chuck.
I make a motion we construct a new 9-story parking garage on the south and west sides of the property, the west garage, and construct a new 10-story parking garage on the northeast corner of the property, north garage, with the condition the applicant receives approval from the Director of Public Works to use alternate parking angles and dimensions, thank you, Dick, and for a driveway within greater than 30 feet.
I second the
Width greater than 30
Okay,
feet.
but I've got to add that the applicant said that they could do the screening on the...
That's in the first motion.
Is it?
Yeah. We approved it. We added that to the first
I don't
motion.
think so.
Yeah.
Oh.
Read it back, you'll see.
You
Do it
could
again.
probably do it, yeah. And also the corner, as illustrated. Yeah.
And the applicant provides screening on the west facade on Walker Avenue, consistent with the facades on the other sides of the parking garage.
And the bus station sign.
Well, I said that earlier,
Oh,
but
yeah.
and the rendering the bus station sign that Senor Picard showed us.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
I make a motion we approve the signage with the condition that the applicant receives a variance from the Board of Adjustment from the sign ordinance of prohibition against signs being located in the street right-of-way.
Second.
Okay, I kind of have to point it out. We really didn't go over the signage to any degree.
You're saying that it has to be within the ordinance.
Right, yeah, we didn't, there are no,
Yeah.
there weren't, it was all compliant except for that the directional sign is in the right-of-way. So there were no issues with it. We felt.
Okay. All right, sorry. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
I move to approve a recommendation for approval to the Board of Adjustment for the following variances: building setback regulations, minimum height regulations, sign ordinance which prohibits signs in the street right-of-way.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
And last but not least, I move to provide a recommendation of approval to the Planning Commission for the following: A, close and vacate the 20-foot alley and reserve it as an easement, and B, close and vacate the right-of-way along Sheridan Avenue.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Thanks for being here, and good luck with your development.
Thank you very much. May I ask what the vote was? We had trouble hearing on item 1 on the bus station. What was the actual vote? So was it unanimous? Okay.
The bus station was not a unanimous vote.
What was it?
2 nays.
4-2. Thank you.
Okay. Now, moving right along, thank you all for being here. We do appreciate all that you're doing, and I'm excited to see the development. We are all excited about that. Okay. Now, after all that, you're going to leave? That's okay. And Corey's coming back. He's back. Communications. We've already had the presentation from OG&E. And administrative, are there any big things that you want to talk to us about?
No, other than we've been crazy busy.
Okay, you've been crazy busy. And what do we look for next month? Do we know?
We do not know. We originally thought it would be OG&E, but they've asked to go in March. So,
right. Okay.
So I don't know what all. We got a lot of applications in yesterday, but we haven't even gone through them.
Okay. Any comments from the committee? Oh, okay. Okay, Connie needs to leave because she has a meeting. Yeah. Okay, well, our next meeting is February 19th, and we are adjourned. Thanks, Corey, for sticking it out. Totally disintegrated. Not really. I think it was